Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special episode of the X Bottom. I'm one of your hosts, Alejandro. With me is the Assassin Master.
Paul, hey everybody, how's it going?
How you doing, Paul? It's you're off to vacation soon.
I am. It's been 2 years that I've been married now, and so we're
That's
gonna dash
nuts.
away to a quick chill time. We've realized that during the fall, nobody wants to go to the beach, so we go to the beach and
Understandable.
nobody's there. Whether or not we get in the water isn't really the point. It's just getting away from everybody. So yeah, we're just gonna do that for like a long weekend to get away from everything. But how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for this episode because we haven't done what we call the evergreen since May. For like people that don't know, Paul likes to go to vacation a few times a year, and thank God this year you didn't have to suffer a natural disaster because last year
We
when
got
we
real
restarted,
lucky.
last year when we restarted the show, there were like 2 weeks where one time that you went on vacation but you forgot to tell me, so I had to scramble and get our fellow friend PJ, aka JOK, to kind of do like a random episode of the X Button where we just talked about the Nintendo Direct we had just seen, so it was just like a special one. And then another one was that when the hurricane, was it Ida?
Ida.
Yeah, so when Hurricane Ida hit you, it was like you went to shelter, and I was like, oh yeah. And our fellow friend Zach was the one that helped us to kind of cover, and we did like a traditional episode. But then this year I was like, let's just work ahead if we know that you have a at least planned vacation time, so we can record anything. So if anyone goes back to episode 53, they will see that we did an entire episode where we talked about the games that were like our favorite from each console that we owned, even if they were not really like the best games. Those were always the games that we thought about, like that one game that when we think of this console, that's the one game that I always remember fondly from that console, whether it
A
was good
fun
or bad.
episode.
It was a really fun episode, emotional episode at times, just
Oh yeah.
it being
Gosh,
nostalgic.
that's
and
right.
and now we're doing another nostalgia trip. But before I go into that, just a reminder that this is the X Bottom Podcast, or gaming podcast that posts every Thursdays from 2 p.m. onwards, God willing, available on the YouTube channel Escape Gaming, as well as most audio services around the world, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. You can find links in the RSS feed at anchor.fm/escape-gaming. If you enjoy our show, give us a like and subscribe. So, usually in a traditional episode of the show, we will talk about the games that we're playing right now. Obviously, like one game that we're currently playing is God of War, but we're gonna talk about that much later, and we're not gonna talk about news this time because I want this episode to celebrate a franchise that the more I think about it, is like it's very near and dear to my heart, especially experiencing its latest entry so late this year, and that is Assassin's Creed, which it's turned 15 this past Sunday, which is
It,
insane. 15 years. Fall of 2007, Paul. A fall that is forever going to live in history as one of the greatest gaming falls of all time. And probably one of the most special falls because it's probably the last time we got so many new franchises start there. On top of like incredible sequels. That was the fall of Super Mario Galaxy. That was the fall of Halo 3. That was also the fall early. Well, even though it didn't launch in the fall, it was like at the tail beginning of the fall and of summer. Bioshock came out that year. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare came out that year. Mass Effect 1 launched there. Uncharted launched there. The Orange Box compiled all the Half-Life into one great package.
there
But
was things were built different back then.
they were. And
Golly,
just imagine the level of creativity that just reached the zenith in that 360 PS3 generation, because obviously the Xbox 360 launched in the fall of 2005, and the PS3 launched in the fall of 2006. So that fall was the first full year of the PS3. That was the second year of the 360. If you're an Xbox 360, that was the 2 year build up of everyone's getting to know this hardware. Now the games are starting coming, and what a perfect storm to be a gamer then. And I still remember the one game from everything that was coming out at that time. Even though I once told about an episode last year how much I used to be a huge Call of Duty player. That defined like where I ended up leaning in my console history. The one game that fall that looked so cool and so interesting and so different from everything else that felt to me like this is what the new machines can do now. Like that couldn't be done on PS2 on Xbox was Assassin's Creed, the original one. And just thinking how far that series has come from its like humble beginnings as a assassin in Jerusalem in the Crusades to now these days a Viking simulator. It's kind of insane. But kind of what we want to do this time, like we want to commemorate each game from this series. I played them all. Paul hasn't played how many?
2 of them.
Yeah, so Paul hasn't played 2 of them. One that it's like so unimportant that I don't blame him for not playing
Like
it.
nobody
And
really played it.
yeah, and then the other one that to me I will always say was victimized by its previous entry launching so catastrophically that it paid for the sins of its predecessors, even though it was a much superior game. But how we're gonna do this, how we're gonna celebrate this, is that we're gonna actually go through each game of the series, kind of have like a quick overview of what it was, if we remember playing it back then, our favorite memory from that game specifically, and then behind the scenes, Paul and I we ranked these games. Like there's 12 of them. We're ignoring a few like offshoots that they're like games that we're not gonna talk about. Is Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, the game that came out on Vita that then got an HD port on PS3 and 360, and it's included in the Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered.
Yep.
I personally haven't played it. I remember, well, I played a little bit of it on Vita, never finished it, and it's not really that essential. The things that are important of that game were actually realized in another entry, so I'm not actually gonna mention that. And the Chronicles games, we're not gonna talk about those 3, even though they're interesting like ideas. We're not gonna talk about Bloodlines, which was the PSP game that came out, and we are not gonna talk about any mobile offshoots. We're gonna talk about like what's considered the main line. So, without further ado, Paul, let's start with the one that kicked it all off, Assassin's Creed. This is the game that when you pop the disc in, you're greeted with like sci-fi shenanigans. You remember there was like everything is like all white flashes of everything. There's like characters with no faces. You seem like you're hearing all these voices, and then suddenly you're popped in the future, and it's like this Matrix scenario of reliving the life of an ancestor. I tell people that was something that was kept secret, like be in the lead up to that game in 2007. There were some of the weird animus glitches that we know of. That was always like in the early looks, but no one really paid attention until you started playing. What do you remember of playing that first Assassin's Creed?
My unique approach to that one was I think within 6 months to a year after it came out, which I didn't know anything outside of what I could kind of Google about it. So I knew of the weird future shenanigans, and people were phrasing it as if, yeah, it kind of sucks and nobody cares about it, but don't worry, you only spend like 10 minutes there. Just don't worry about it. And I was like, all right, that's kind of weird, but sure. And for the rest of it, because all I wanted to do was to be the assassin in the Crusades and stuff. And as I've mentioned on record before, I had to talk my parents into a lot of games,
Back
almost
then.
making up plots of games to more align with what I think they would like. So I remember having to be like, yeah, you work with like the Crusaders, and you fight the other people, and you help Jerusalem, and y'all like Jerusalem, right? Like that's great, isn't it? And just making up stuff after they finally let me do it. And I remember popping it in and just kind of like, okay, this is weird. All right, who's Desmond? Why is this all going on? But it also piqued my interest because especially as it went on, and like hearing a lot through like the audio speakers, because they had like the PA system of the assassins trying to save Desmond and failing, and you're like, what is going on? What this sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on just outside this building, and I really want to know more about all that.
Yeah.
So even though I was like, all right, I don't really care about the modern day stuff, just put me back with the swords and everything. After a while, I was like, no, I want to see more of this, especially by the end of it, which I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a second. But yeah, my experience with it was transcendent, to say the least, because I'd never played a game that was quite like that, opening up such wide areas, giving you such freedom of movement, and just the crazy stuff that you could experience running around through those city streets was such a great atmosphere. And I loved it, and I loved the Assassin's Brotherhood and everything about that. The Templars, just everything they set up was so exciting. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting this game on December of that year. I went to the States with my family for family vacation, and we were actually riding from McAllen, Texas, all the way to Orlando, Florida, through a car. And halfway through that trip, we stopped by a gas station that had a GameStop, and I went inside there, and I knew that I wanted to. I knew I had brought in money because I knew I wanted to buy games because back where I live in El Salvador, games were so damn expensive, and I knew they were not gonna be expensive in the U.S. comparatively speaking. And I remember the collector's edition of Assassin's Creed 1 was there. They had the big box, the big metal box that came in with a toy of Altair and the double disc version of the game that came with like a making of DVD. And I remember buying it. I was like, this is it. This is the game that, from all the games that I've been seeing, is the one that looks so interesting and so reminded me of Prince of Persia, the series that kind of served as the how can I say this, the precursor in animation and kind of structure. Even though that game was linear, at least a lot of the bones of that series kind of made their way here. So I was like, this seems like the next evolution of Prince of Persia. Wait, and it's open. And I wasn't big into open worlds at that time because if I remember correctly, the last open world game that I really, really played weren't even GTA games. It was Spider-Man 2. So it was like that, because then there were other open world games like True Crime and all that, but those were like older. I was way too young for those, so I was not playing those. So the concept of an open world was still not like ingrained in my mind. That getting to see a game where looked that good at the time, and shockingly still does. If you play it on Xbox Series S and X with the resolution and frame rate patch, that game somehow still looks really good for modern times, even as 15 years later. And seeing places like Jerusalem, Acre, Damascus with that level of atmosphere and liveliness, that it has an atmosphere that I don't think many games can replicate. It had an allure that I will always remember. Now, what was your favorite moment from that game, if you remember one?
I remember very specifically a lot of the chase sequences because I was shocking to hear not very good at stealth.
Yeah. Though it's not to be fair to you, it's like stealth in Assassin's Creed is not traditional stealth. It's like this social stealth that doesn't even. It took how many games? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games to give you a crouch button, just to give you an idea. Like, so.
Yeah. So I remember some of the areas, especially the one there was like an archer guy and like a warehouse, and you had to chase him through the streets and stuff, and that was really fun. But a lot of it was like dealing with the Templars themselves and King Richard, the Lionheart, because like I remembered some of these characters from history, and I think that was one of the big surprise like excitement parts from me, because I was like, wait, I know who that is. Oh shoot, that's crazy, that's the dude from history. And of course, like now you're sitting back like, how young and impressionable I was to see one character that might look like who they looked like in real history, and thinking, oh, this is so crazy, like I can't believe it. And just loving every detail of that. And I was super into knights especially, so I was super sold on every part of that aesthetic and that environment. And I was also learning a lot about those cities in real life, and how important they were. And it was really cool to be able to just kind of walk through all of that. So that was like, I'd spend afternoons just walking through Acre and like just messing with all the knights there, and the Teutonic knights especially, because I like their black outfit with the white cross on it. And I was like, that's so cool, man. And that was like one of my biggest things about it. It was like the story was secondary to me. I just loved running around and like antagonizing the guards, fighting them, and getting as many as I could on me, and then doing the counter button to kill all of them instantly. It was just so fun. But
yeah, to me it was like, I have a couple. The first time you ever do an eagle vision, like the eagle climb, that you climb at the tower and then you press the Y button or triangle button depending on where you're playing, and get a lay of the land, and then do the leap of faith.
Yeah.
That just became so ingrained to what that series was, and I was like, this is so cool. Like being able to have a building where if you look at specifically designed crevices, that's how you know that you can climb everything. When before games, you just didn't do that. if you climbed, they were pre-scripted. Even like similarly, a game that came out around that time, Uncharted, Drake's Fortune. That game had climbing, but it was very specific spots on climbing. And then having Assassin's Creed that had that freedom of, if you know where to look in specific building, you know that you can climb that. That level of interactivity, I was like, this is next gen. This is what more technology can give you. And I really enjoyed the final assassination and everything that transpires after that, because the game has a very Shadow of the Colossus style structure that repeats ad nauseum. That it gives you like a structure of, okay, you have your amount of targets, you go to a city, you go to your assassin bureau, you get an explanation of who you're about to investigate, then you go into your investigations, then after you finish the investigations, you go back to the bureau, you get the approval, you go to see your target, you see the target do like a big monologue or a big moment that defines that, yeah, this is the guy that I'm gonna kill. Then you kill him, then you hear the whole soliloquy about him getting killed and him trying to explain you, and then the chase as you go back to your bureau, rinse and repeat. The final assassination was taking that and flipping it on its head. It was when you're at the cemetery from one of the previous targets, and then you're there. You're there for the final target, and then you see the final target looks at you and says something, and then the guy that's like preaching for the guy that's been buried says like, the assassin is right here between us, and then it opens, and then it starts like the big fight. Then you beat him, and then you realize that it was a decoy. And it was Maria, who becomes who ends up being a very important character in later games, or how like the games continue.
Yeah.
And then knowing that, oh no, the actual target is with King Richard, and he's gonna like go whisper to say that the assassins are the real threat, and now they're gonna try to get him and Saladin against one common enemy, and then you have to go into the battlefield to go talk with King Richard and have that battle with Robert de Sava, to then realize that everything that you've been doing has been for naught, because the real villain was your mentor. And then you go back into you go back to Masyaf, your base, and then everything is so weird. Yeah, and everything's like black and white. Everyone's like mind control on what's happening, and then all this weird stuff with the where we end up knowing is the Apple of Eden, and that's when I was like, holy crap, there's like more sci-fi stuff. This isn't just like historical stuff. There's like some weird crap happening. And then the thing that happened at the lab, when you finally get Evil Vision and see all the bleeding that's happening there, I remember being legitimately scared of like, what is this?
Now, like, once you mentioned it, I was like, oh, that was another moment, because we had to sit with that for a while.
2 years. You 1 year. Me 2 years.
At least a year for me, because I was like, oh my goodness, I need to know what happens. That can't be it. Like, I need to know. Yes. And my gosh, so yeah, ending with that and then leading us straight into our probably one of the best sequels of all time.
Yes, but before we go into that, what were some things that you didn't like about this original one?
Oh, well, first of all, the unskippable cutscenes.
Yeah.
Just having to sit there, I would start the mission and I would put the controller down and go do something for 10 minutes while the dude preached at me, because there's no way to get around it. And I mean, just the fact that there was only I think 7 missions or 9. Okay, so there weren't a whole lot of them, and there was only a few that really stood out to me. The fact that I can only really remember the warehouse one and maybe the final missions. There was one with on the boats that I really liked. But
that's the second to last one in Acre. That there's like this paranoid dude that goes through the boats, and you have to like jump through boats, which you needed to land on the boats because Altair couldn't swim. That's
right. And that was another thing that annoyed me. But then I was like, okay, I'm just accepting it because it's like they couldn't program in the swimming process, whatever. So stuff like that, the lack of memorable things about it. The combat was pretty lackluster in the end, even though for me it was like, this is the best thing ever. I've never seen something so crazy.
The thing is that it's very simple combat. It's just it's just counter, and the enjoyable thing about that combat is that it was so simple to master that the joy wasn't seeing the ballerina style animations, which were really cool to look at back then.
They were. So yeah, that's really all I would say about true negatives, but then it was like the first installment, so I couldn't really be too harsh on it.
Basically it was a foundation. And also I have to add in negatives that the investigations in order to trigger the assassinations were such a chore, because there were very few variations. It was always either you find two characters that are gonna sit on a bench, press the Y button to hear the conversations that you can skip, or tell someone that you're gonna like steal like a letter from them, or what was the other one? Or maybe do like some aids to some fellow assassins that are like collect these flags or kill these targets, and sometimes killing those targets will be very annoying because if you fail and you're seeing that you have to restart the sequence, but the fallen bodies are there because the game had like a weird dynamic AI system with the crowds that they will gather around bodies and then would have enemies be more alert and you're trying to do that. It would make it very frustrating. It did, and again, kind of mentioning the weird structure that it had, that it was like rinse and repeat for like 9 times in a row until that the ninth one like pulls the rug on you. They needed a little bit more variety, which we know they eventually ended up doing, but they also completely changed the structure of these games. But they were testing stuff. It was like so many people really disliked this game, like now looking back, but when I look back at it, I'm like, there was just something really special there that really laid a foundation and an atmosphere and structure. I feel like even the things that I don't like, I still do enjoy it. So Paul, we individually have ranked all 12 of these games that we're gonna talk about. Where did this game land in your list without saying anywhere from the 1 to 12? Where did it land?
This was 7 for me.
Mm-hmm.
Out of 12. It kind of fell a lot because many of the sequels did everything it did way better, but I still had to give it a little bit of credit for its aesthetic, which still hasn't really been topped, and just how fun that first experience was falling into this series.
Yeah, and to me it landed in number 8, so for you to land it even higher. And just slightly higher, kind of similar to you. It's like I like the atmosphere of this. I like how it's kicked us off and how striking it was at first glance. But the sequels definitely like took this formula and build upon it like pretty handsomely. And that we're definitely gonna talk about that much later. So moving on to the sequel now, Assassin's Creed 2, which launched on the fall of 2009. So this was the fall. If 2007 was the fall of the initial like new franchises, 2009 was gonna be the fall of the sequels that took everything to the next level. Like we got Call of Duty 4 getting Modern Warfare 2 there in 2009. Uncharted got Uncharted 2, the game of the year that year, and Assassin's Creed got the sequel that was like, to me to this day, one of the biggest leaps in quality from an initial foundation to a sequel that took almost everything that game did and amplified it to 11 and fulfilled the promise. Yeah. And even to this day, like you just think about it, how many times do we always refer, maybe the sequel is going to be the Assassin's Creed 2 to Assassin's Creed 1 of this thing. It's like, that's how much of an impact this sequel did to like set a foundation of what's possible for a sequel that learns the right lessons from the first game, a game that could be flawed but had so much promise, and then fulfill that potential. What do you remember of Assassin's Creed 2, Paul?
I remember reading so many articles about it to get as much as I possibly could from it. I knew of the Renaissance and I knew of Italy, but I had no idea as much as I did about like the Knights. So it was more like this curiosity and knowing that you were going to bump into people like Leonardo da Vinci and all those different big characters that you know from history. The fact that you could swim, the fact that you could pick up and put down weapons and just use whatever was around you, so you could theoretically just counter your way with your fists to steal weapons from the other enemies. I loved like snatching spears from the guards and using it against them, and just how crazy unique everything was. The aesthetic of Ezio, which still holds up to this day with the one side cape and everything. Oh man, the story taking such a huge jump from kind of the cardboard that was Altair and giving us Ezio,
the personality,
the still one of the best characters in all of gaming, and showing him from the very beginning of his silly kid days to literally his birth, actually, and then fast forwarding to seeing most of this guy's life, just I believe the early part of it through Assassin's Creed 2, and just the growth from him to being like an actual, like, okay, there's growth happening, he's getting more experience, he's getting more tempered, he's not as much of a wild child as he was at the start of the game. Just seeing that growth throughout that, and everything else, the expanse of the atmosphere, not the atmosphere, the environments, like the cities you got to go to. I think there were 4 or
so there was Florence, there was Urville and Monteriggioni, there was Tuscany, there was Forlì, and there was Venice.
Yeah. Okay, so 5. Plus the final mission to
at Rome. Yeah.
Which obviously we'll talk about more about Rome later, but yeah, just the fact that you could do so much of that. You could change your armor, your colors.
They added depth. They added depth to the game. Yeah.
Every avenue, it just boosted that, and of course running your own property, and you working with your sister to make that happen. Also a really great example of sibling relationships, which we don't really see a whole lot of. Usually the sibling exists to die or turn evil. So it was nice to be like, hey, you have your sister who like actually helps you and stays friends with Ezio like the whole rest of the series that he's in it. So yeah, just I don't even know how much I want to say outside of the fact that it just did everything better than Assassin's Creed 1 by a large margin.
I remember the launch of this game coinciding with me doing a history for where I wanted to do Italy because of this particular game launching that specific fall in 2009 when I was in sophomore year of high school. And I concur with everything you've said, and I'll also add that this was also one of the games that it started expanding the future story. Also, finally giving you a little bit more context of what's happening outside, giving Desmond also a little bit of agency because he was just captured in that first in that first game, and finally learning that there's more of a reason why you're going back in history to learn the mysteries of your ancestors because of what could be potentially happening in the future, and having those things intersect in a way that made it intriguing while also keeping you in the past as much as possible, while everything in the future always felt like it was important in the 2 times that it sent you out in the future. And on top of that, with the expansion of gameplay here, where you mentioned about the expansion of like being able to finally buy armor, there's an economic system that didn't even exist in the first game. The suit customizations, the assassin's tombs that were straight up like mini Zelda dungeons, or sort of
get the cool armor and everything after that.
Yeah, the Altair armor, all the different side activities that you could do that were still like fairly simple because this was Ubisoft finally like experimenting with open world formula that eventually would define a lot of their catalog, but this was used as kind of like the test bed to start building on that. The fantastic ending of this game that finally
a lot more cathartic for sure than the first one.
Yeah, because it had one of the greatest twists and near the end that you're like, wait, what? Remember the Minerva? That
I do. I couldn't forget. The whole idea of finally getting through literally fighting the Pope of all people, only to find the revelation of things like the precursor. I almost saw the precursor legacy, like I'm in Jack.
I know.
but then it basically the person speaking not to Ezio but to Desmond himself through all of that and through proxy, and the growth of all of the main characters as well. The introduction of I'm blanking out on their names, but the guy with the glasses and the girl with the
Sean and Rebecca in the future.
That's it. Which I loved them and their dynamic from the start. And the other one that we don't talk about, the very poorly mapped Kristen Bell from 2009. Oh man,
Lucy,
bless her heart.
I'll say this, like, because I definitely want to talk about like more positives of this game. A few negatives I have about this one is that I don't know what happened with the visuals in Assassin's Creed 2. It was like
and it's only gotten worse with age.
Yeah, it's so funny, like the first game, because I remember when this one came out, a lot of people were like, yeah, this is an improvement visually over the first game. And I agree to a certain extent when you look at the entire game in general, because it has bigger maps, more intrinsic architecture, especially because of Renaissance Italy at the time, even more interesting crevices and distances that you can climb up. But then like these faces took a little bit of a step back, especially how often you look at those faces.
I think the only exception was Ezio himself, which I thought looked great. Everybody else, like I remember his dad looked weird.
No, his dad looked absolutely hideous.
Yeah,
the mom looked weird. The mom looked great.
I remember, of course, Lucy herself looking terrible.
Yeah, compared to the first game.
I was like, what happened with that? But all right, whatever. We're not going to focus on them. And I know Leonardo da Vinci looked great, but it was like such a hit or miss for some of those faces. So I guess I really kind of went blank to that and more focused on everything else going
Exactly.
on.
It was like a one step forward and in city landscapes, in colors and all that, and two steps back in like faces, especially because this game had actual cutscenes that the first game didn't do, because the first game was always about keeping you in the hands of the controller. They decided to go a little bit more cinematic here.
Yeah.
But that's really the only thing that I can think of as a negative of Assassin's Creed 2, because like its soundtrack, still to this day, that Jesper Kid soundtrack, incredible. The Ezio's family theme is like so intrinsically tied to the series now that immediately as you start hearing the original version and even like later versions that they put in even later entries, it's just, it has defined the identity of the Assassin's Creed series. That the soundtrack is one that I listen to often when I'm working or chilling, because it's just such great ambience. And to this day, just that leap from Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed, the original, to this one was such, and having to wait for that 2 years, such an important like sequel to get, that to me, like personally to me, this is the peak of the series in impact and in memorable moments and identity. That even though I would say further sequels improved on gameplay and all of that, there's just a special aura to this one for me personally. This one ranks number 1 for me. Where does it rank for you?
For me, it was number 3, and we'll talk about any of the sequels that I feel personally did a few things better, but overall still, just the fact that after all these years, since 2009, out of 12 entries, only 2 other ones for me managed to kind of get past it in certain areas, is like, it really tells a lot about how good this game was. Like, even if you tried to make a great game, and everything else went great, somehow it still wouldn't match up to what they were able to accomplish with this game, and just how fun it was, how crazy the experience was, from the plot, the gameplay, just everything that was going on.
I'll just add, this is probably my most replayed open world game ever. This one specifically. I've played to completion on PS3. I played to completion on 360. I played on completion on the collection on PS4. I have a save there for the Xbox One version that I'm kind of playing with FPS boost on Series S. I have replayed it in those consoles many times since this game came out in 2009. This is like one of those classics for me, because it's so manageable, it's big enough, but like it feels like a meal that you can really finish and replay and kind of always get the warms and fuzzies. Even if it has
is self-contained, it like builds on things, but it doesn't, like, you almost don't need to have played the first one to understand the plot of what's going on. And
the first one just makes you appreciate the leap. But
yes. And I would say, just like what you said, for at least my top 3, I really ranked these a lot on how often I replayed them. Just like you said, because back in the day, you got 1 or 2 games and you made that last. And Assassin's Creed 2 was one of those ones where I was like, I want to like do some adventuring and really get into what I'm playing, and that was like, I'd pop that in, start from the beginning, and just clear through.
Yeah, and me, that I always mention how I love games giving me a sense of like escape, like a sense of escape, like, well, kind of based on how we're here the umbrella of this podcast. Europe is always such a dream of mine, because I just know that there's so much great cities, like of great historical importance over in Europe, that getting to experience that with this game and its immediate sequel is like, it just transports you. So now I know that we move on to the sequel that came out literally a year after, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I tell you this, Paul, I remember when this was announced in like March or April of that year.
Yep.
I was terrified. I was like,
Same.
Oh no, another one so soon? Because it's so crazy to think, but we now wait for games now so long. Like games take so long to make now that we're used to it. But back then, waiting more than 1 year for a game always felt special. It always felt like an event. Just a 2 year gap could be like a big thing for us. Getting another one of these within a year, I was like, wait. So this means that are they gonna Call of Duty this thing where we're gonna get another one, but these are open world games? It's like, and they said it's like, oh yeah, this is a sequel that's gonna start Ezio again, and it's gonna have multiplayer. Red flag, because it was like, okay, so the whole idea that every game was gonna take us to a new protagonist out the window now. So how is it gonna be felt special? And then it came out, and I was flabbergasted how damn good this game was. They had said in interviews that how they were able to pull up this game was that this game city, as it was already built for Assassin's Creed 2, and they realized it was so darn big that they were like, you know what? Maybe we can make like a full game out of this. We already have a very big game over there. Why like waste the final few moments where the game's at its peak in Assassin's Creed 2? When you go to Rome, it's like you're already in El Vaticano to go find Rodrigo Borgia, the Pope, and do all the nonsense that happens there. And that's how they were able to do it. And I would say that Brotherhood is Assassin's Creed 2, but from a gameplay perspective, Assassin's Creed 2, but better.
Yes, oh my goodness. Like just similarly to you with all of that fear, I went through the exact same thing, because I was like, okay, first of all, and this was also back in the day when 1 gig of a DLC was like super, like that was a lot of data. Because I remember one of the DLC for Assassin's Creed 2, the Leonardo da Vinci one, was a gig and like 1.7 gigs. And like,
the Leonardo da Vinci DLC is from Brotherhood. You're thinking of the lost episode. You're thinking of the lost episodes of Assassin's Creed 2.
You're right. So it was like a gig, and I was like, this is freaking ridiculous. I can't stand this. This is too much. And then they're announcing Brotherhood and that whole process, and I was like, wait, so we're not going to get somebody else? It's going to be Ezio again? Like, I liked him, but sounds like a DLC. What's the deal? And then sure enough, I went ahead and bit the bullet. I was like, all right, I need to find out what happens. And the way it started was so good, because you were like, all right, you got Borgia taken out, and then Cesare shows up, like the siege of your base,
getting
like
destroyed,
armor, like the crazy cannonballs flying through the towers and things, you riding through the city on a horse. It was like, oh frick, we're just going for it right now, like no setup, like just go. And so I was losing my mind from that alone. And like just like you said, Assassin's Creed 1 did the Assassin's Creed 2, where just made everything better. Brotherhood made everything from 2 and made it better again. Where you had the one thing that I was like questioning was the fact that everybody acted like Ezio was older than he really looked and felt. And they're like, you're an old man.
Yeah, like, he's just in his 40s. That's what's so funny.
He's like, he looked the same. He literally just got back from the events of the second game. But like, when you think about it, it's been like 20, 30 years since he started this whole thing, which I guess makes sense. But just like the fact that you were able to be a mentor to new assassins and like control them in your gameplay, send them off on missions. I would get like emotionally attached to these people.
Yes, especially if they get killed by accident.
Yes, because you could go over and you could like close their eyelids as like a prompt in the gameplay, and I was like, oh shoot, that really hits, man. And that sucked, because you like work with them and like do a mission for them to get them to join you, and then they get a cool outfit, which was always different with a different weapon that could spawn. That was awesome. You could throw your weapons, and so you could buy a cool weapon and then just like chuck it at somebody, and if you didn't pick it up, you lost it and you had to buy it again. But just like everything going on, and it was just so
you had the crossbow also.
You had the crossbow, you had the cool
the parachute
outfit, the parachute, the DLC with Leonardo da Vinci, where you get to use like his crazy cannon move and his like hang glider thing. Oh, just so much cool stuff. And then the fact that you were in Rome, which had like a lot of history to it even before this, so you're like digging through ruins, and that was the first time, at least for me, that it really clicked, where I was like, oh, like dungeon delving is part of this series, like to a T at this point, where now we see it. It's like you gotta have that in an Assassin's Creed game, just like it. You have that in Legend of Zelda, and so it's just the fact that they just did everything better in the end was so great for Brotherhood.
That's like my biggest positive about Brotherhood, is that it felt like this is the game that Ubisoft finally nailed what they wanted to do with the Assassin's Creed formula and gameplay wise, because Rome was your playground. The economic system that helped you build your villa in Monteriggioni, they applied that to the entire city. So you didn't even need to go back to Monteriggioni to try to like reap the benefits of your investments. It just meant that you were like slowly rebuilding Rome and taking it back from Borgia control. So they added extra little wrinkles for you to find the towers that you do synchronizations. They were under the control of the Templars.
Yeah, because you have to burn the banners and stuff. So it was like part of the storyline, not just, hey, you got to revisit this thing we already did. It's like they've taken it, you have to take it back. And usually you had to like fight enemies in the area to even climb the tower in the first place, which was a whole nother thing you had to do. It wasn't just part of the frustrating process of unlocking a map. It was, you're doing this for yourself and your family, and it's like, frick yeah, let's go. Oh
yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, just everything about Brotherhood.
Now, do you have a negative?
Barely any I could really remember. I remember it feeling super cathartic and exciting. The plot line wrapped all of the storyline up that I can remember. The ending with Ezio and the silenced pistol, was that this or Revelations?
No, the Revelations.
Dang, okay, well I'll talk about that later. So yeah, just kind of like finishing a lot up, and even if you didn't play Revelations, it almost felt like a good ending point for Ezio's story in a sense.
So
that's
where I'm going to like now jump in with a little bit of the negative with the negative points.
The modern ending for Brotherhood sucked.
No, it's the opposite. The modern ending for Brotherhood was amazing. The Ezio story, a little filler. Because there's not much that happens other than you fighting Cesare Borgia. It felt like you just more living like the peaks of Ezio's life as an assassin, becoming now the master assassin that now builds assassins up. When before he was just trying to like restart the order with the few assassins that had remained in the area that are unearthed when you met Niccolo Machiavelli and the uncle and all the people that you had met in Assassin's Creed 2, realizing that they were part of the order, and now you're rebuilding that order. The ending of Ezio's story here is just putting the apple of Eden he found that got stolen from Cesare Borgia into a temple. But the modern stuff of Brotherhood, excellent. This was when Desmond was finally starting to have the assassin abilities. You were controlling him, and on top of that, it had the insane cliffhanger of you finding the apple of Eden, and then controlling you and killing Lucy.
I hated that part.
I absolutely loved it because it was
especially
insane.
because of how it wrapped up that plot line in Revelations. But I know that's more Revelations than
I would say 3.
Fault of Brotherhood.
Yeah, Revelations and 3 kind of like fumble the explanation for that.
Yeah. So we'll talk about those in a bit. But yeah. So for Brotherhood, I was like, it was great in a sense of like, whoa, that was crazy. I want to see what happens next. And then the fact that like we had to wait and
just 1 year though
you know how it's like when you get the answer to something that has been teased, it almost retroactively makes things worse that came before it. You look at your Lost and your other things like that. I think this is one of those situations where if it had paid off, it would have been great in hindsight. But it didn't, so it really messed me up on that.
Yeah, and those are the sins of the next 2 sequels, but I would say that the ending for this one, because I remember, I will vividly never forget the IGN review for this game by a guy named Cam Shi was his name. Yeah, he gave it an 8. It was one of the lower review scores that this game got, because this game actually got a ton of high reviews there. Yeah. He had mentioned that it was a fun but inessential sequel. How in the world are you calling Brotherhood an essential sequel? I would say the ending of this game, specifically in the modern day stuff, you cannot not play Brotherhood.
no.
Like, this is a legit continuation.
You almost think about it as well. Even if I know you said it was filler for Ezio's storyline, you could argue that
Just in plot, but it makes
direction.
it's more like in plot direction, but it was not filler for you seeing
For character.
Ezio as a character being fulfilled.
Yes, because if you jumped from 2 to Revelations, then he's all of a sudden like way older and way more like competent and a leader of his assassin brotherhood. So it's like for Ezio himself, absolutely essential. For the overall Ezio plot, no, but then also for modern, very important, because that's where I was like, oh, you're just going to be filler for the next one, which it absolutely was not. The filler is the next one, but before we talk about that,
exactly,
how did you rank this one?
So we ranked this one, actually, like, we both ranked it as number
Identical.
2. Yes.
And
with the difference that to you, like, Brotherhood is a step up above AC2, and to me, it's like this one goes beneath. And even it's just slight, because there's some, depending on the day you ask me, it's like sometimes Brotherhood is number 1, sometimes AC2 is number 1. To me, you just have to like really think about like what I really appreciate, and to me, it was like, had the AC Brotherhood Ezio storyline, other than being a great character representation of Ezio at the peak of his assassin mastery, had it also had a very important plot in his side of the story to also complement the importance in the future, kind of like how AC2 managed everything to feel so cohesive and so important together. This would have been the easy number 1. But as a gameplay perspective, this is the best one. That's how I always say it. It's like it just feels tired. This was the one that during combat also introduced chain killings, like when you kill one and then you start like moving from enemy to enemy, like killing them so quick. This is the one that introduced it. It made combat more exciting, and all the level, like the Da Vinci machines that you could go to the sides, like the tank, the flying thing, the boats. On top of it was just a haven of variety, and on top of that, the multiplayer. We didn't even talk about the multiplayer
attempt of that.
And it worked.
I barely touched Brotherhood's multiplayer, but
I did.
Because this was remind me which version was this?
This was the
like the
cat and mouse
competitive one.
Yeah, this is the competitive cat and mouse that you're
was
like
surprisingly good. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, because I stayed away from it for so long, and then one day my friends were playing it and I tried it and was like, wait a minute, this is kind of entertaining.
What makes it so great is the fact that it's so different from anywhere else, from anything else is in the market.
Never played anything
at the time, because it was a cat and mouse game about you like being subtle, walking through the maps, seeing the slightest bit of like misdirection from enemies to see if they're acting weird, and then that's when you like stab them. And
for anybody wondering, it's like a small map that plays out like an Assassin's Creed map. You have a bunch of different varieties of the same like 6 or 7 NPCs, where you would play as one of them. And for any enemies you had a target pop up, you had to find that NPC that was acting out differently, and that was a player within other NPCs. So you had to act like an NPC walking through, but also find your own targets to finish them off. So it was like this like round robin of you're hunting this person who's hunting this person who's hunting this person, and trying to get that to work. So if you just ran through, that was how you got killed. But if you had to be too passive, you wouldn't get any points. So it was crazy back and forth. And
it was, to me, it was just so unique, and they made it work. To me, it was like, that was one of the things I was like, they're tacking on multiplayer. And I tell you, that multiplayer was anything but tacked on. And I sort of miss it, because they eventually dropped it, but they kept building on it for the next entries. But yeah, that was Brotherhood. So now we move to 2011's Assassin's Creed Revelations.
We didn't actually say we put it at second, though. Right?
Yeah, we said
said we put it the same, but I don't know if we ever said second place.
Yeah, second place. No, it was like it was both of us in second place. Yeah, for you, a step up from AC2. To me, a slight step down, but so negligible, which we'll talk about later.
From there,
but yeah. But now we go to Revelations, the 2011 entry. I remember when this was announced on May 2011. I remember it was in the middle of the PlayStation Network outage. That was when the it was around that time. I remember the Game Informer issue had happened, and I was like, oh, another one. So that's when they confirmed to me. I was like, I guess they're really gonna commit at releasing these games yearly. I wonder what it's gonna be, because I had thought, based on how Assassin's Creed Brotherhood ended, that now we're like, okay, it's been 2 years now, so it's time to get the third game because it was a 2-year wait between 1 and 2. So I thought that in 2011 we were gonna get Assassin's Creed 3, but that ended up coming the year after. So initially I was like, okay, do they have more to tell or do with Ezio? Especially because now we got an Ezio that's old, like
I
the
really
white
thought they were
beard.
setting up to like, okay, this is gonna end with Ezio's death kind of thing, because especially with the intro cinematic being so big on like tying
Hanging
off
him,
the
yeah.
noose and all that stuff, and it was like, oh frick, this is gonna be crazy.
I tell you, because that intro cinematic was it was also the trailer cinematic that they announced that game with at E3 2011.
They killed it with those intro cinematics
Oh,
for
yes.
like 4 years running, across the board. I remember I would just sit there and watch the intro for Assassin's Creed 1 playthrough of him saving the person from getting hanged and all that craziness. And Revelations was no slouch either, of him like traveling from where he was to find out the truth of all of this.
Yeah.
And I guess it was like, all right, this is Ezio coming back for like really figuring out what's going down.
Yeah, when they promoted this game as an older Ezio, finally like going back to the roots of the Assassin Order and how that would eventually bring us back to Altair, I was like, okay, that's interesting. They literally dropped Altair like a bad habit after Assassin's Creed 1, and despite this one tiny flashback in Assassin's Creed 2 that shows you that because Maria, the Templar that was a decoy in the first game, ended up being your love.
Which is crazy that I didn't even recognize her in Assassin's Creed 2. I was like, is that the same lady? Like, what? Because I think they changed the way she looks subtly.
But again, that was what they did with the change of faces from Assassin's Creed 1 to 2. So Revelations, they hooked me and they convinced me that there was something worthy to be there to be had in this game. And to be fair to them, at least from an emotional perspective, I would say Assassin's Creed Revelations is the most emotionally resonant Assassin's Creed game from this trilogy, because they promised this was the end of Ezio, and they delivered on that in a great, really emotional way that really connects both Altair and Desmond together in a way that to me is like one of the most artful ways an Assassin's Creed game has ended. Unfortunately, when the game is not dealing at all with Ezio finding the path of the assassins and he's entangled on politics in Constantinople, this game is a slug, an absolute slug.
The fact that the big game mechanic they added was a tower defense
and bombs
to defend all that was just so frustrating to deal with. And for some reason, the guy that you meet at the start like kind of rubbed me the wrong way from the beginning.
Yeah,
where he was like,
I don't even remember his name, but I remember
this
the guy.
guy's insolence towards Ezio, like you know who this is, kind of thing. Which I guess that's sort of the point where it's like, old man coming in to show me how I do my job, kind of thing. But like the whole time when Ezio wouldn't talk back to him, and he's just like, whatever. It was almost kind of funny, but then I was always like, stand up for yourself, Ezio, you're better than this. The hook blade was kind of interesting, but it wasn't really enough for me, because it was like 1 to 2, it was like, all right, 2 blades. Brotherhood, it was still 2 blades, but you had so much other stuff. This one, it was like they pared back a lot and refocused themselves. They started changing a lot of the way things looked and felt, which I didn't appreciate. The bombs just felt like nothing to me.
They were just not an item that I would like to use, because why would he use bombs as an assassin? It just felt like...
It made sense for some of it, like the smoke bombs, but then after a while it was like, all right, we got like 4 variations of bomb here. I don't need all this.
Yeah. I remember it was one of the Game Informer... He was the editor-in-chief that he worked at Game Informer for 30 years, and he left now. That he had that that I remember telling you in our chat, I was like, man, that's the end of an era. He made the kind of like the astute comparison of saying that this is reminding me of when another annualized franchise like Tony Hawk, because they were releasing games yearly. They started adding gameplay additions just to add them that didn't make sense, just to try to justify the sequel. This game, gameplay wise, I didn't think it provided the level of cathartic entertainment that having Brotherhood's Rome could give you, even though it still like acted the same way of you unlocking the city, repairing stuff and getting an influx of cash and all that. It still it kept a lot of things from Brotherhood, but it was like it was already done in Brotherhood. The additions were not meaningful enough, and the only reason to play this game was to see the closure of Ezio's story, which unfortunately was like 20% of a game that in 80% is just about dealing with Constantinople politics. Although I would say that introducing Sophia, who ends up being the final love interest of Ezio, that was a cool part of it because it eventually dovetailed into Ezio retiring, finding love, and finally finding the light at the end of this life that he's chosen. That was the cool thing to see.
I'm curious, did you ever see that animated thing
Embers,
that actually
yeah.
shows?
Embers,
Okay.
yeah. Great. It was a great ending because it was sad. Yeah, heartbreaking. So, and that's included in the Ezio collection.
That's cool.
I came to see it in the Ezio collection because I know it was a part of the collector's edition, remember? Or
I watched it on YouTube or something back when it came out. But yeah, that was a whole nother thing I was curious about. But yeah, it's like Revelations. I'm glad that Ezio like got his sort of happily ever after through that, finishing that off. Now for the modern stuff, that was the
filler.
Nothing burger right
there.
Yeah,
that was just basically Desmond stuck in coma after what he did in Revelations, and if you did his side stuff, in Brotherhood, and if you wanted to do more stuff with Desmond, you had to do this first-person puzzle things. Remember that was like Portal, but not really.
Yeah. And that wasn't it at all, and it was such a weird feel. And I kind of like the dynamic between him and 16, where like that was like, all right, we're getting a lot of answers on who this person is at least. So I was kind of like understanding that for at least the first playthrough. But he was also a huge ass, so I was like, I kind of hate him now. Okay. And of course, both of them looking like such late 2000s dudes with their big baggy jeans. And
the hoodies.
I was like, oh gosh, this is more dated than I thought. And because Revelations is probably the first entry on this list so far that I've replayed within the last year or two. And one of the only entries in that. And gosh, the realization that I was probably a little too rough on Revelations originally, but even so, with where I brought it back up, it's really not that great, especially now that I've revisited other ones that just do all of that better.
Revelations I think was worth it just to see the end of Ezio's story. And also Altair, because it was cool to see Altair also grow into an old man in the 5 sequences you play as him. And there's a part where he kills Habas, I think was the name, that with the pistol. He's like an old man climbing off Masyaf, and and then
that's what I'm thinking.
And then he just pulls the gun and shoots it. That was a cool moment, and also how artfully like his final moment of him locking himself in the vault with the piece of Eden that Ezio finds. And then the thing exploding to make Desmond be also part of that, and him speaking directly to Desmond, and that triggers the end of the game, which finally gives us like the story of the death of the precursors. By like
we figured out, Ezio figured it out. He wasn't just at the end of it. Assassin's Creed 2, he was just like, what the crap? What's the deal, guys? And never figured it out. So the fact that Revelations showed that he was competent enough to figure out all of the mysteries even that many years ago was really cathartic to me personally for some reason. And then also giving Desmond kind of all right, we've wrapped it all up, Desmond. It's all on you. Let's freaking go. And I was almost like, okay, are they going to just jump straight to modern after this? And obviously we saw they didn't do that.
No, they did not.
Before that happens, where did you end up putting this on your list then?
This again, like just like Brotherhood, put it in the same spot in our list. So this was number 9.
Yeah,
this was
9 for both of us.
Yeah, so this one is actually lower than AC1 for me from the ones that we have that we have talked about.
I have to say, it's a shame to me that it has to end up that low, but it's a testament to how everything else just kind of managed to pull it out a little bit better in the...
Yeah, it's definitely the game from the Ezio trilogy that I replayed the least. I remember even that had one spot where I tried replaying it a lot back on PS3 because that's where I got this game. Because I started on 360 and then switched to PS3 for the rest of that for that series. Now I have them on all Xbox now, thanks to the collections and Series S. But yeah, Revelations just, I don't like replaying it much because as a game it's just not that fun. Everything that they added just made it so annoying. The story is great, but what I like about the other ones that we talked about was that everything kind of came together better than here. if only that great story only 20% of the entire experience, it's not worth revisiting much. So
my last mention though is that Ezio's Revelations outfit is probably still one of the best though.
I would agree with that.
I slept on it for so many years, and looking back, I'm like, no, that was peak. He did great getting that outfit. Anyway, we can move on now.
Yes. So now we're moving to this is an interesting one because
Yep.
just remembering the lead up to this one and how everything shook up. So
Yep.
in 2012 they announced, finally after we took our side kind of like our side steps with Brotherhood and Revelations. To me, it was like calling Brotherhood a sidestep was being a little too mean to such an excellent game. But they were trying to justify, be like, don't worry, while those games were happening, we had a big team. The big team that made AC2 was toiling away at this. We gave them an extra year to make Assassin's Creed 3. The official next entry of the series is going to be the biggest and the best. And then because first it was like, no, Assassin's Creed 3 is finally coming out this year. Then the poster leaks from GameStop happened. That it was like, wait, is Assassin's Creed 3 in the American Revolution? Are you playing with that? So are we finally switching characters after being with the same one for 3 straight years? And on top of that, a Native American assassin during colonial America.
That was pretty nice.
During a colonial America revolution, the time of the independence of America. I was like, that sounds so unique. I don't remember many games trying to tackle the American Revolution. So we're gonna meet George Washington. We're gonna meet the Benjamin Franklins, all the John Dees, Charles Lee, all things that I remember from American history. I was taking American history that final year of high school because that's when I was learning about all these things. I was like, man. And on top of that, when you know that the Templars are very tied with the whole Freemasonry, they have kind of like a lot of similarity, and you know that Freemasonry was actually big around the Revolutionary time. I was like, oh god, they're in the really spot where all of this is gonna like bubble up.
They're going Nicolas Cage with the National Treasure.
Literally, and that it
was all Freemasons.
And then the first trailer that they revealed of Connor or Ratonacon or whatever his name was, it was this of him like running through the trees and doing like rope darts and seeing like more savage combat and things that seemed like they were taking cues from Red Dead Redemption of like skinning animals, taking the skins to like change for
that's right,
for that was currency.
The same year as
Red Dead Redemption was 2010, but after 2 years you're like, okay, they could have probably seen that game and taken some cues from it, and they did take some cues from it. It's like it had, and on top of that they were like, if you have been paying attention, we've been saying in the future storyline, we're like dealing with the potential of the end of the world in 2012. This game just happens to launch in 2012, so
a little too topical.
Everything is just coming together to deliver this culmination.
It was the Infinity War and Endgame before that.
And evolving the technology, because this was gonna use a different version of the engine, so new animations, new controls, and all of that. And then the game came out. And it was a disappointment.
It was a full-on freaking disaster, which I completely forgot. We skipped over it during the Revelations. I wanted to mention how hard the ending of Revelations with the silenced pistol slapped. Because I will give it that much anyway. But yeah, and on to 3, it just, every aspect of this game disappointed me from like the first hour. And it only just... why did they allow them to make half the game not even about Connor?
Yeah, so that was a big thing, like
half of the game.
So I wasn't mad about that because I thought that was like an interest, especially when you realize what it was leading up to, that as you're playing as Haytham Kenway through the first 6-7 hours of that game. 7 hours. You're playing as Haytham, meeting all this like historical figures from like the War of 1812 or something like that, or the French and Indian War.
Right, that's the one.
Yeah, the French and Indian War, and seeing how it was built, and you think, oh, so this is how the assassins build their presence down in the Americas, because they had already teased that Connor was a mix of an Englishman and a Native American. So I was like, so I guess we're gonna be playing as that, and then they revealed that no, you've been playing as a Templar. So you're like, holy crap! So it pulls the rug.
The reveal was good.
Yeah.
It was
for a story
everything else
perspective,
around
from a
yeah.
story perspective, but it was like it's 7 hours before you play as Kid
Yeah.
Connor to make him grow up into becoming like the full-grown assassin with like a suit, which I think it's a pretty cool suit.
It is.
And
I'll give it that. Yeah.
and then when you're
It's
finally Connor, the game rushes all the way to the
Yes.
finish because everyone was like, "Oh yeah, they're taking a slow build-up time because this game's gonna be massive." And to be fair, this is like the new engine gave us the biggest maps in an Assassin's Creed game yet because the towns that you go here, they were very expansive, like long. The problem was that there are not many tall buildings, so a lot of vertical movement instead of like climbing. And the things that you climb so quick that it was like, I don't know about that, but I feel like it has some great thematic narrative, especially when you see everything from a perspective of a Native American that was being appropriated by both the English and American forces, and how they were like being mistreated, and seeing things like slavery like so head on and so raw. I think this game had really good intentions, but it also feels like as much as they were trying to do, it's also oddly rushed. That's what I couldn't wrap my mind around, the fact that they had said that they had been working with this game for a long time. I was like, man, if they worked this for 3 years, it means that they were really putting all their effort. It was absolutely less polished. It was like the new controls worked well while you were running through the trees, while you were like in open terrain. When you were in the city, the controls sucked because they changed the way you do free running. Before, in the previous games, to do free running was that you're holding the trigger to go into the high stance, and then you were holding the jump button to get into free running mode to be able to do the parkour. In this one, they put everything in the right trigger.
So you
because
just
they're
start
like
jumping randomly, and running upstairs, running downstairs, and throwing yourself off of them. And oh gosh, it was so frustrating. This is one of the other ones that I replayed, as you know, before all
fairly
of this.
recently also.
And I was shocked because I really wanted to actually like this game. I thought maybe I just wasn't seeing it right. I was like, bad expectations leading to a disappointment, but like maybe by itself it was good. And I was so disappointed even further that I just could not stand myself playing through that game. I got to young Connor and I gave up. And it, like, why they did that whole process, the whole talk.
Now, real quick, did you finish this game back then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely did.
Just making sure.
Oh yeah. No, I powered through. I tried to get as much of that sucker out of it. I played all the DLCs, the Tyranny of King
Washington. Yeah.
Cool concept, but a lot of craziness going on there. And just, man, it was so frustrating. But at the same time, I have to give it a few props for trying to incorporate modern aspects into that, because the combat had to change a lot. Where you had the guns and the musket, that whole process of things. It was kind of cool that you could have this moment of warning to hide behind an enemy to avoid getting shot, the actual shooting in the musket and using it as like almost a pole arm whenever you weren't.
It absolutely has great gameplay ideas, especially, and if you're able to like chain all those gameplay ideas, it's as good as the series has ever been. The problem is that its problems are so innumerous. The level design is so strict sometimes of what it wants you to do that it feels like you're being held by the hand too much. Way too many spots of running into this place to just witness a cutscene, running into this other place to just witness a cutscene, taking control away from you a lot, despite sometimes having really great moments like the Battle of Bunker Hill, where you're like trying to like make your way around as the two sides are shooting themselves and you're trying to go through the sides.
Probably one of the like legit awesome moments of the game, but it made me feel like it was so disparate and separate from everything else that was going on, that it was like, all right, we're in this moment and you're at the battle, woo, you killed the guy, and it's like, all right, you're done.
And I'll say this side stuff in this game is actually really good. In fact, I would say that a lot of people found their love for this game when they were not engaging with the main story. When you're left to your own to explore the frontier, go hunt, do side stuff, do the boat things, because this was the game that introduced the ship combat.
And I have to give it props for that too, because I really also liked the mentor character. It was really cool. That was like
Achilles,
super like unwilling to teach Connor, and slowly finding this kind of acceptance between the two of them for it. It was kind of awesome, honestly. But then at the same time, like you said, the gameplay was all there. Parts of it were awesome. I love the idea of the rope dart, where you can do that on a tree limb and drop back, and it hangs the person that you killed. It was like great. And then at the same time, it's like there's so much really bad ideas thrown in there, and then the lack of polish, and then the really not satisfying ending to that.
Don't even get me started with how they were able to fumble the ball so hard with the modern day stuff, with how they, spoilers, kill Desmond, to not provide closure, but to provide a door open for the series to continue when that was supposed to be the end of the story. It was so obvious and so sloppy that it ruined and soured the future area of Assassin's Creed almost forever. At least until much more recently.
They really didn't get it back under them until probably Valhalla.
Yeah, and even then, probably Syndicate, but even then, just the tiny bits. It was like they were stuck in between the rock and a hard place of us fans that enjoyed the games when they tied both sides together versus fans that really just like the historical parts and then not really letting go of one or the other. So the ending of as someone that thought that game was good, the ending of Desmond was sours me so much on Assassin's Creed 3 when I think about it, that despite me liking a lot of everything that surrounds the story and the ideas that they were throwing in that eventually got fulfilled with later entries, it's just so sad that to think this could have been the one. This could have been the one that they gave themselves the extra time, or so they say, to be able to deliver the best one, especially a numbered entry, because it was like 1, 2, the third game, that now the one that we're putting the stamp compared to Brotherhood and Revelations, but those games, the side games as they would like to call them, were way better. So this one comes pretty low for us. This is my number 10 in my list, Paul, out of 12. This is your number 11. So
it is, and only because the only other game below it is one that I literally did not play, and even another game that I only played about 2 or 3 hours of, I decided to put higher on this list because forget Assassin's Creed 3. Yeah. If I could take just a couple things from it and just remake that game from the ground up, I think that's the only way I could ever like it.
Yeah, man, I doubt that we're too far removed from that. So
no, it never will happen. That's why I'm just like, it's never gonna be good.
Yeah. To me, it's like Assassin's Creed 3 is the before and after for this franchise, because before 3 was when I was the most enthralled with the series, when it was my obsession. I couldn't wait, count the days for the entries to come out, because I needed to find out what was next. Even with the slight dip that was Revelations, I was still like excited knowing that now the third main entry was coming, and then that happened. So yeah, AC3, I feel a little higher than you. I appreciate its good parts more, but I just can't deny it's one of the black sheeps of this entire franchise, especially some of the long-term damage that it did. But the year after, they were like, we ain't doing side stuff anymore. We're straight jumping to 4. And I remember, especially coming from 3, I was like, wow. So they're just being blatant now. We're now getting the 4th entry immediately, not even a year after. And when I looked at it, I was like, okay, so they're doing a pirate thing. I guess they really fell in love with the one of the big areas that people said they'd really love from AC3, which was the ship combat, which was legitimately cool.
Yep.
Will a game work with those same mechanics, same visuals, not much of an evolution for a number sequel? And then it came out, and I was shocked. I was like, oh wow, they actually did an Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 2 sort of leap from 3 to 4, taking a lot of the initial ideas that were so disparate in that third game and bringing it all together into one of the most fun gameplay packages of the Assassin's Creed series that is not much of an Assassin's Creed game. I'll just get the negative out of the way now, because I feel this is one of the few entries, because there's another entry here that I would say it's pretty great, but also when you don't look at it from an Assassin's Creed perspective, it's like the Assassin's Creed stuff is so ancillary to the point that it's laughable sometimes. But it has one of the greatest protagonists in Edward Kenway, voiced by what's his name? Crap, I forgot his name.
I wouldn't be able to tell you because I have no idea.
Yeah, he plays Constantine on Legends of Tomorrow, and Constantine actor Legends, Matt Ryan. Yeah, Yeah, played by Matt Ryan, who recently is now the modern voice of John Constantine. Great English, sort of Welsh accent that's so sardonic and so likable. That this is a story that was. If there's something that I really appreciate about Black Flag is that even though it does nothing for Assassin's Creed lore, it tells a really great personal story of loss and redemption for Edward Kenway, of a love that he lost because of his pirate ways.
Yeah.
And eventually seeing him through that process kind of sort of embrace the assassin order that just kind of came to him like very randomly, and from them knowing that that's kind of where the lineage started going from there. I thought that was interesting, but the gameplay loop of this is where to me it really all clicks. It's a This nails the Pirates of the Caribbean whimsical swashbuckling fun. The quick battles, even the animation work took a step back from 3's very elaborate kill animations. They kind of keep it quick because that's a pirate. Yep. The quick pirate, clack clack gong, let's go. And this was also the first Assassin's Creed game post Far Cry 3. That was the Ubisoft game that
was a real turning point for sure.
Yeah, that was a really turning point for Ubisoft, finally making more meaningful activities within an open world and collectibles, kind of like embracing the checklist nature of like, oh, I see that, I want to go pick that chest, I want to pick that sea shanty, I want to do that little side activity. And
sea shanties were slapping as well.
Yeah, on top of the being able to get those sea shanties that you're gonna listen while you travel through boat, which by the way, this is the sequel to this Legend of Zelda Wind Waker we never got. A game where you like sail the high seas and go to islands and you drop from your boat and go inside the island, explore, loot, go back, have actual ship combat that can sometimes be very messy because it still has Assassin's Creed 3 problems of everything is in the right trigger, so you can sometimes jump on top of things you didn't want to jump at. Hunting the big whales, going down the ocean to go loot the bottom of the ocean.
The big man-of-war ships in the four corners of the map. But yeah, like just like what you were saying with all this, like I remember when it came out, I found out that was like one of the first examples I found out of a leak where somebody said, "Oh, it's going to be pirate themed."
Again, a GameStop.
Yeah,
poster leak.
And I remember telling my friend who's like not really into games but really liked the Assassin's Creed series, I was like, "Hey, buddy, I got an insider tip. It's going to be pirate themed." He's like, "No way, that's crazy." And then the trailer came out. There's Blackbeard.
Yeah, Blackbeard.
I was like, "I told you."
Yeah, let me tell you about this man, Edward Kenway. That's one of the great reveal trailers.
Oh gosh, the excitement I had, 'cause just like I had a big night thing back in the day, I was super into pirates at this point. I had books and like encyclopedias. Like I literally was wanting to learn as much as I could about these suckers.
That's why side tangent. That's why Uncharted 4 resonated so well for you.
Oh yeah, that's another reason, because I already knew most of these characters from my own history. So I was super into all that stuff. The outfit was hardcore. I loved Edward Kenway's outfit, the blonde hair.
There's a reason they keep including Edward Kenway's outfits in the Ubisoft Club unlocks for further games.
Because it's just, they peaked with that look of it, and it was so good. It like perfect pirate and sort of assassin mixed with it, and just like you said, negatives out of the way. I feel like the second half or like last quarter of the game really falls apart in the plot way sometimes, which is certain ways like Anne Bonny and the other girl that was in it. I feel like they really disservice those two characters. I understand that part of it is because they needed to all of a sudden Revenge of the Sith style, like, all right, we had all these crazy awesome examples, now we need to make them die the way they died in the year they died. So we're just gonna kind of write them out of the story and say, she got pregnant and then died in jail. And I was like, what? Are you kidding? You're just gonna do that so disrespectfully to one of the best pirates in the world? And like that was one of my issues with it, where they kind of like, all right, we're gonna flub all the details of what they did and then just kind of write them out of the story when it's time for them to die in history. So that was one thing. The other is that Edward Kenway was not an assassin for 90% of this game, and he was just faking it and somehow had the perfect moves because he's just good like that. You're not going to convince me of that. So that was really frustrating. Outside of that, like most of everything else was really cool because it was just this idea of a guy that was super ambitious and kind of ruins his own perfection in the way, because by the end of it he's got everything he wants and he's so focused on this one thing that he misses Adewale, one of the best characters of all of Assassin's Creed.
The DLC Freedom Cry,
yes,
great.
Which I was going to even mention that. I had listed that alongside this as my favorites because even though it's a DLC, it felt like its own standalone storyline because I don't want to get myself lost on my train of thought here because just gameplay-wise, it was great. Being able to have your own ship, go wherever you want, you got your crew, you kind of go do your thing. The ship battles were awesome. You could just leave the ship and dive into the water to like find loot and things like that. Really great concept. And then being able to go to all of these different islands, almost like, I mean, now we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but back in the day when I was reading the actual Odyssey, it felt like that, where you were like, this is like Odysseus is going through with the ship, he just finds islands, he goes on and he finds adventures with it. Crazy stuff, awesome environments, the leaves in the storm ruffling, and like everything looks so good because it just had such a huge jump in quality of like visuals for me. The mechanics felt better. It was like the polish that should have happened in 3 finally got to show itself in Black Flag. Just like you said, like the whales, the big man of war ships, all the crazy stuff going on with all that, just all of that was so cool. Getting to raid ships and decide what goes on with it. So yeah, I could talk forever about all that, but it was great. And I could spend so much time going through that. That was one of the first games where I was like, I'm going to try to find everything. And I failed.
Quick question. Where did you originally play Black Flag?
360.
So you didn't play it on PS4?
I think. Wait, did they come out at the same time?
This was a launch game for PS4. That's one of the big things that really helped this game was that it was one of the few.
Play it on PS4.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it came out after the PS4 launch, then yes, I played.
It was a launch game on PS4.
So then I would have played on PS4 then. Okay, never mind. No, I played it on both because I had it on 360 first.
The 360 version came out first, and then and 2 weeks later the PS4 version launched with the console.
Yeah, that would make sense.
This game also, one thing where it benefited over Assassin's Creed 3 was that it had a platform on the PS4 and the Xbox One that can handle the new engine, because the Assassin's Creed 3 was buggy as hell. Still is.
And it's funny because I must have looked past so much of that, because I now remember I have a 360 case in my house, in my room. So I definitely had on 360 first, and then.
But the thing is that it was more polished. Black Flag ended up being also more polished than Assassin's Creed 3 because they had extra time with the engine. But Black Flag also benefited highly as being one of the few meaty games that you could play at the PS4 launch that was from third party. And because this was if you wanted to do everything with Black Flag, it had a lot. Absolutely a lot.
So much. And it was so fun. And I love just sailing around, listening to the sea shanties, and seeing the whales and dolphins breach nearby. And so it was just great. Yeah. I loved experiencing that game.
To me, had this game had tried to do a little bit more to try to soften the blow of what happened with modern day stuff, and trying to set a new direction that I could want to try to keep that I would try to keep invested, on top of trying to have a little bit more mission variety, where in the main missions you're tailing literally everyone 90% of the time, where you even have tailing missions on ship. I would have this way higher than where I have it ranked, but I also understand why it's considered by many one of the best, if not the best, Assassin's Creed games, because from a gameplay perspective, this was a Brotherhood kind of, here is your sandbox.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And it was just so great. And even the concept of the city, I keep wanting to say Libertalia because that's the Uncharted 4 one, but there was another city that they made, and I'm blanking out on the name of it, but that was really cool as well.
And also just kind of on top of that, we haven't really mentioned this as any points of what we appreciate about games, but this is also one of the few Assassin's Creed games where I can say that the setting and the cities themselves worked against my enjoyment a little bit, because of the tropical of its perpetual tropical settings, whereas the other ones had a little bit more of a variety. Even especially Assassin's Creed 3 had the winter and the fall and the
Yeah.
spring kind of like cycling in and out. That kind of helped give a little bit more visual flavor. That this one was more visually monotone, but the gameplay of this one carried it so heavy. Where I ranked this was my number 6.
And for me, this was my number 1.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the one right there with Brotherhood that just I played constantly over and over again, or just
it's an easy one to go back to.
Yeah, because the plot was kind of sat backseat with just let you. All right, you want to just ignore that and go do your thing. Go do your thing. Don't worry about it.
And that's kind of like the beauty of this. Like you can kind of see based on my list and what his list is, what are the things we appreciate more from the Assassin's Creed series, and why. What his number 1 could be something more middle of the road for me. But yeah, Black Flag is still a great game. I like, despite many of the things that could work against my own enjoyment, I give it its flowers. So
Certainly.
the next year after that, Paul, it was like, because of Ubisoft was like, no, we're still gonna keep releasing these games. Now we're gonna be more blatant. We're releasing 2 the same year. One for the old consoles, because what we want to do with like the newer hardware is absolutely not gonna work even in downscale form on the old hardware. So they released both Assassin's Creed Rogue and Assassin's Creed Unity in 2014, the same day, in the same day. So I remember when I heard that, I was like, okay, Assassin's Creed 3 was a disappointment, but Black Flag was like a swing back up into positivity after a low blow. Can the market really sustain 2 of these? And we figured out this year was slightly sort of the breaking point for the series quality wise. Even though initially some people argue that the one that came on 360 and PS3, which is Rogue, which chronologically Rogue comes before Unity, was a stronger game than the one that came out on PS4 and Xbox One, which was Unity. Rogue is one that you didn't play, Paul. I'll say this. Rogue is basically Assassin's Creed Black Flag 1.5. It has you just still have a boat that you can kind of sail around. You revisit a lot of these cities from Assassin's Creed 3 from a different perspective, and also from like a time, because timeline wise, Rogue
was cool.
Yeah, Rogue was after. No, actually, Rogue was after Black Flag, before 3, story wise.
Okay.
So you're kind of like seeing like the end of the Assassin Order in the Americas.
Yeah.
In a period after the initial period of Assassin's Creed 3, and actually no, even it's weird the way where the timeline lines up, because you see Hatham Kenway in Rogue, but it's like the Assassin Order is being like wiped out. You see a young Achilles here. In fact, you see what makes him like a paraplegic in this one. So
yeah, this is definitely before 3 and
after Black Flag, yeah.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's
1752 to 1760, so it's like about 10 to 15 years before.
Yeah, it's after Black Flag, but it's interspersed with 3 in a before and after kind of way.
Black Flag took place in 1715. I remember that very specifically.
Absolutely. So it had that, and also had the interesting perspective of you playing as a Templar, that an assassin turned Templar, kind of trying to connect the dot of how the beginning of Assassin's Creed 3 you thought you were playing as an assassin, and then you realize you're playing as a Templar. They were trying to blur the lines of like, maybe the two sides aren't that different from each other. The problem with Rogue is that it's such a nothing burger of the revelations. There are barely any revelations. It just put a cap on that era of the series, but more as a Revelations, but worse in a way of like, because Revelations helped cap off the Ezio storyline. This one tried to cap off everything, even though it was a middle spot in the story of what was happening in that colonial French Revolution, American Revolution era. And it's an interesting diversion, but probably one of the most least essential and least interesting Assassin's Creed games that offers literally nothing to the table, gameplay wise, nothing to the table like lore wise. It definitely just felt like its origins is like, okay, PS3 and 360 guys, you guys that still don't want to buy a PS4 and Xbox One, we have a game for you. Yeah. And that's really how it felt. And I remember some people were trying to, back then, were like, oh yeah, I think Rogue is what I really wanted Black Flag to be. I'm like, no chance. Absolutely no chance. I only appreciate that Rogue gives me snow at the very least. So you can venture up in the northeast to some like icy places. So I'm like, okay, at least it has a little bit more volume, aesthetic variety that Black Flag didn't have for me. But Black Flag is just such a much more engrossing experience for everyone that likes that ship combat. So since you have nothing to say, you put it as your last as a
as a default, because it just, I didn't play it, and I kind of wish I did, but it's just too many years now for me to go back.
There's a remaster. So there's a remastered on for PS4 that actually is a better remaster than Assassin's Creed 3 remaster. I tell you that the faces don't look like crap.
I still think I'd rather play something more fun.
Yeah, actually, well, you have PS Extra, right?
Yeah,
it's there. If you ever want to try it, I can tell you,
it'll probably sit there because there's so many things now that it's like, as the time I have to play goes down, I'd rather play things that I know I want to play.
Yeah, especially we're not gonna have a quiet time like the middle of this year ever again. So Rogue may remain, but I tell you, it's like, even I played it, but to me it's like so inessential. It doesn't. The only thing that I can even spoil it for you, and you probably already know this, that's actually remotely cool, is that the very ending of Rogue is literally the beginning of Unity. The very beginning of Unity, with you losing it with your character Arno, losing his father. You are the one that kills his father, and then you bounce.
Oh shoot! Okay, yeah. I don't know if I realized that, but it like played such a small part in the actual part of Unity that
it was the beginning of Unity. It was like just the kickstart of that game. Yeah. So yeah, that was Rogue. But now we move into Unity, which was the one that really took a lot of the spotlight in 2014 from these two games, and not in a good way. No. This is the Assassin's Creed that was both a breaking point for Ubisoft annualizing this franchise, especially this kind of big open world game with high detail and all that, and unfortunately putting it out before it was ready to, in a more intense way than what happened with Assassin's Creed 3. This was put out before it was cooked.
I have to admit that somehow 3 was more polished than Unity was.
Yeah, at launch.
Yeah. It's not anymore. No. We'll talk about that, but golly, it reached meme qualities with Unity, and this is like, I would say, the true breaking point, just like you said, for the series as a whole, where like the writing was on the wall since 3. But this one was where it just snapped and everything fell apart, with faces not loading in, textures being messed up,
the frame rate being like in the 20s and in slow digits.
It was messy for sure, but at least I want to kind of get those negatives out of the way, as alongside the plot itself involving the main two characters, and the assassins itself. So
there was like, this had an interesting like perspective and trying to put you in a Romeo and Juliet situation where you're the player are the assassin and your love is actually a Templar, and trying to see how that could come. It can like,
at least you're from a family of those respective ones, and each of you is slowly becoming an assassin and a Templar respectively. But boy, does it kind of jump around in that area.
It's like it again has the Assassin's Creed 3 problem of rushing too many stuff before anything can really develop, and on top of all the bugginess that happened at release, this is like the infamous Assassin's Creed game. Like it lives in total infamy for how it completely shifted what Ubisoft ended up doing with this series going forward. And it's unfortunate because now that Assassin's Creed Unity is fixed, ignoring its garbage story out of the way, what it did in ambition with the animation work, the detail, the crowd density, the massive skyscrapers of France, in Revolutionary War France, it still looks impressive to this day, especially now that it works.
Yeah,
this
is so pretty to look at and to run around in, because this was the one where I remember they did a crazy promotion with Assassin's Creed Unity, and having people actually in modern day dressing up as Arno and all the crew, parkouring through Paris and like grabbing onto buses, and it was like super illegal. So they were like, yeah, you can't like technically associate yourself with us, but go do this thing and film it all. And it was so awesome to look at. But man, it was just the detail that you could go through for sure.
Yeah, man, this was also the breaking point between everything that you see that looks awesome is not translating well to how you're controlling it. Assassin's Creed always had this weird the way Assassin's Creed has always controlled is that it has a lot that's automated, that you hope the character is gonna go where you hope them to go. And with the added animations they added with Unity, they look cooler because Arno, your character, does this really cool Spider-Man like flips going down. But is it gonna work if you're like controlling it?
Needed to,
yeah,
maybe so, maybe not. And I love the concept of it, and usually it worked out for me, but sometimes it really didn't. And then they completely overhauled the entire combat system, which I got better at after a while.
It's hard. That's one of the hardest combat of Assassin's Creed.
They specifically I remember when they did like interviews about this, and they were like, yeah, so you're supposed to be an assassin, you're not supposed to be this walking tank that could just wipe through 50 enemies. And so we're going to make the combat really hard to make you try to be more stealthy at all times. So if there was like 2 people, even just regular enemies, it was really hard to fight them. And if there was like a third dude showed up, you were like, no, I gotta run. Like, I can't handle all this at the same time, because they'll attack you at the same time.
Yeah.
You have to like perfectly parry to deflect any enemy. It was, and if anybody with like actual armor showed up, it was like over for you.
From Brotherhood to Rogue, we had the chain kills. That if you kill one, then you can move to another one and kill everything in one hit kill, as long as it wasn't like one of those big dudes that could like block you. But then Unity was the one that was like, let's try to do something different. Let's eliminate the chain kills. And what they replaced it with was a combat that was like, just didn't make rhyme or reason how it worked sometimes, why it didn't work sometimes. Unity was just such a mess of ideas that what's so sad is that also from a visual technical perspective, it was Ubisoft trying to be more ambitious with the series, and they had never been this ambitious ever again because of how it launched. And I kind of wish they could understand that now that they are letting some things cook, that they can try to be ambitious with the new hardware that we have now. Because even though many games that came after Unity did work, at least from a visual sense, they didn't have kind of like, they didn't feel like, oh, this is what next gen Assassin's Creed can look. They were almost too ambitious for the hardware that they had. And unfortunately, with their relentless release schedule and what it did, it was like, now the Assassin's Creed series just wasn't needed for rest. And before I move on to that, this is my second lowest in my list. This is like just above Rogue, because on top of that, the ending of this game, especially with the future, with what they try to say future, it was like they literally tell you, "Oh, this was a waste of time, wasn't it?" So it basically tells you you don't even need to play Unity. So to the ban.
I was far more nice to this one for one reason, and that is the multiplayer.
And I never played it, and I hate that I never played it.
I know, and we've talked about this, so to anybody else wondering, they changed up a lot from did they have the regular multiplayer in Rogue back?
No.
Like the old version? Okay.
The old version,
Black Flag though.
Yes, Black Flag was the final game that had the old version of the cat and mouse multiplayer.
So they changed it from the cat and mouse style to a 4-player PvE heist system. And it was like you would have this massive French mansion or castle or something, and it would set you up. You get to pick your outfit and your weapon type, and then it would just lock you in on that, and you would be you and 3 other players, and you'd have to get your way in. You could use as much or as little coordination as you wanted. And like if one of you got caught and killed, that was it. But if you got that, it was almost like a Escape from Tarkov before that was a thing, because if you got stuff in that, it would translate to maybe not 1-to-1, but you would get real rewards in the single player game for doing it. So you would rush in, you had your buddies, you could work with them, you could sneak in, take it down 2 enemies at the same time together, even shoot 4 enemies at the same time if you really work together. And going from room to room, I mean, if y'all ever watch it, go watch. There was like, before launch, they did like one of those sort of, not rigged, but like a pseudo, this is how it's going to look heist thing. And that was just, it was so fun, as long as it worked, because sometimes you get the connection issues at the start of the game, but after a while they got it to work. And even now, like, I think there was somebody maybe last year actually invited me to try playing that, and it was like there's a couple of people that still try to play that game, it seems. So good for them, I guess. So anyway, yeah.
So I will say this about say where you ranked it.
Wait, what?
Say where you ranked it.
Oh, I ranked it at number 6.
So I'm 11 and you're number 6. So
Yeah.
anyone throw your hate mail to @DorkOfArt and AngelsWord21. I'm just kidding. I'll say this with Unity to give you at least some flowers.
Yeah.
The appreciation for Unity has grown as we have been removed because of what the series eventually became after this.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, maybe we're a little hard on that because I'm not sure about this new direction. Or
I will give it like all of the props for everybody that's saying negative things. It's all accurate. But I will say there's certain areas that it's definitely gotten better at. The environment's still really cool. The one-to-one recreation of Paris is like unmatched still, with like Notre Dame and all of that. Awesome. But at the same time, yeah, it's super unessential to the plot.
Yeah.
And
I tell you, this is a game that never at all got God damn it, are you hearing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's okay.
Yeah, so hopefully it's not here. It's not gonna be like distracting me too much. But like I was saying, I was like, Unity never got any Pro patch or Xbox One X patch. Like this came way too early in the PS4 Xbox One generation for Ubisoft to try to go back in and try to like prop it up with like higher resolution and all that. It does have FPS boost, the Microsoft induced FPS boost to run that game at 60. And I tell you, even with lower resolution, there's a level of majesty to the ambition showed in the cities and the crowds and all that with Unity that even the Digital Foundry guys, the guys that do the technical tests of every game, every time a new Assassin's Creed game comes out, they're like, yeah, all of this is happening, it has these new bells and whistles with the newer games, but they don't have the level of skill and ambition as this other one that even they put it in, they always compare. It's like, yeah, Ubisoft still hasn't tried to do this level of ambition again. They got scared, but they shouldn't have. You could have done this if you have taken your time, but unfortunately with the way that that Unity was received, they always say, because Unity sold relatively well because of name alone, but have a really bad thing and burn enough people that the next one is gonna suffer. And that's exactly what happened with Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Syndicate was leaked as Assassin's Creed Victory in December of 2014, a month after Unity was still having catastrophic problems. So on top of everything that was happening with Unity, this new one that it was like, oh yeah, it's gonna be in Victorian England during the steampunk era and all that, and it seems like you will have a grappling hook, which is interesting. But everyone was like, you fooled me twice already with 3 and now Unity 2 games being completely buggy and completely disappointing, and this one coming in just a year after. We don't believe it's gonna be good. We're not gonna buy it, and that's exactly what happened. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is, from what we know from Ubisoft, is the one that sold the least from this franchise, that had kept growing and growing in sales because Assassin's Creed was just a big name. And this is the one that basically put the old school style of Assassin's Creed to pasture, because Ubisoft always said, we're gonna keep making these games as long as you keep buying them. Well, people didn't buy them, we're stopping. And to me, what makes this sad is that Syndicate to me is what Unity should have been, in fun, in cool characters, cool story, cool vibes. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes 2009 and 2011 fan, that Robert Downey Jr. Version of the character. This game has that tone. It has a Guy Ritchie style tone, from the way like the combat is like with bare knuckles and you're like going full on hand to hand, and the kind of music that is the same kind of music that the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes you hear when he's like having that fist fight. Yeah, that fist fight in that kind of like boxing arena where he then completely destroys that dude in the slow mo. Yeah. It has that vibe. It has that kind of like steampunkian vibe, and I'm so in love with it. And I love Evie and Jacob Fry, especially Evie. One of the few times that you have a female Assassin's Creed character, especially one that had like a cane that doubled as a sword, that made combat really cool. And also, this is the first Assassin's Creed game that finally made stealth. That's something that started toying with Unity, with giving you a crouch button. In Syndicate, it felt like you had more control over how you could crouch, go behind like walls, and play it even more stealthy in a way that finally felt more satisfying. Because again, Assassin's Creed as stealth series worked in social stealth when you're trying to do kills and blending into environments, but didn't work as a really specific stealth game. This was the first time you could do that, and England didn't have the beauty and majesty of France because they pared back a lot of visual quality for this, because they learned that's the lessons they learned with Unity. No ambition. Let's try to pare it back for the game to run. And to be fair, at least on the PS4 version of Syndicate, that game worked at launch. I played it back at launch in October 23rd, 2015. It was a surprise because Unity left me so crestfallen, and I had heard good things about it. I was like, I have such a love for this series. I played them all. Let's see what this one. And I was legit shocked. I was like, this is the most fun I had with the series since the Brotherhood days, to me. And it's one that the way it's being shunned just because it didn't sell always distresses me to no end, because Ubisoft treats it like, oh, they didn't sell because it was a bad game. No, it wasn't. It was not a bad game at all. It was really good. It's just it came out at the point where fatigue finally set in, and it's unfortunate. And this was the other game that you didn't fully play. This is the one that you mentioned that you only played like 1 or 2 hours for. And
this was firmly during my time working with GameStop, where they had this deal that you could take home a new game and then play it for 3 or 4 days and then bring it back, and you don't have to pay anything, just so you can have the knowledge to talk about them, essentially. And I was like, okay, this is all right. Like, Evie's really cool, but I hate Jacob. And like, it wasn't opening up enough for me because it was changing so much about the stuff at the time. I'm gonna say also probably a mistake on my part, because everything I've seen about it after giving up on it at that time makes me wish that I had gone through it and just bit the bullet, went through and played it, because I feel like I would really have liked it a lot more. Especially the older I've gotten, the more I've been like, man, there was something special. Like, I could feel it just looking at Syndicate and looking at the gameplay of it that I was missing with a lot of the others. So I wish I had. And if they had ever fixed the version on PS5, I'll play it.
That's a big problem that to me like distresses me more, is that this game got a PS4 Pro patch. So it got like a higher resolution thing. It was the only version that got that, because when the Xbox One X came out, they didn't touch the Xbox One version. They just left it as is. They just added like auto HDR, which again is a Microsoft thing. But they didn't touch this in frame rate like they did Unity. They would decide to go farther and bring Unity back up in frame rate than this one. And for some reason, I don't understand what happened with the engine, that the PS5 version, like playing this game in backwards compatibility and PS5 just does not work. There's something that the console does that destroyed the lighting in that game, that makes it a flickering mess that I tried.
It actually hurts.
It hurts the eyes, and it's like, it's unfortunate because unless you have an Xbox One or an Xbox Series X and S that you can play that game on backwards compatibility, even if it doesn't have like bells and whistles, that's like the only way to play that game modernly if you're not on PC. The PC version of that game is really good. I was actually hearing some podcasts that they went back to that one, and they were like, yeah, if you have a PC that's like fairly decent for this time, for a 2015 game, you can play that game there, and it looks beautiful. It works well. It brought back a level of fun to Assassin's Creed that it didn't have since arguably the Black Flag and Brotherhood days as a sandbox, and you controlling the different bureaus of London. The grappling hook adding so much to the verticality, like being able to like start climbing, do the grappling hook, climb up, or shoot the grappling hook to do the big gaps, so you don't have to drop to the floor to try to cross over, because there's a big distances a lot in London sometimes.
Yeah.
And such a cool vibe, and that's always going to be the game that distresses me because I love it so much. I ranked it number 3 for me. That high, just beneath Two and Brotherhood for me, and like how much I highly regard it. And I feel it's like from the PS4 generation, that's the only one from the old school style of Assassin's Creed that to me reaches the heights from the other two. Because as we know from this one, then they took a year break, and then the entire series completely changed forever.
Also for me, I ranked it unfortunately down at 10 just because I did not finish it, but I really wish that I could have put it a lot higher, because I feel like it would be if I
Yeah,
finished
this
it
would
all.
have been the perfect time, and I hate that you can't play it because you have a PS5. So
And then after that, that 1 year gap of the unfortunate commercial failure of Syndicate, they came back at us with a trip to Egypt, Alejandro.
yes, oh yeah, Assassin's Creed Origins, the first time that, the first of a three game batch that Ubisoft completely changed what Assassin's Creed was and tried to make it more an action RPG that still tried to do a little bit of elements of the stealth that try to define that series. But this was definitely a game that they looked in 2015 at The Witcher 3, because that was the same year that Witcher 3 came out, saw how successful The Witcher 3 was, and they were like, how could we implement Witcher-esque stuff into our games? And Assassin's Creed Origins was the first one to try to do that. It completely reshifted combat into shoulder button combat, like Dark Souls and many other action games that have kind of switched their control schemes. Now enemies have a lot of health. There used to be health in other Assassin's Creed, but now it felt more like they have levels, so you have hit points, and you have to level up your character to be kind of like at a proper level to be able to kill them. You have to invest resources into your hidden blade to
You then had to hunt animals and find like ore and stuff to unlock and upgrade each of those items in turn between your armor, your hidden blade,
and keep bringing those up if you want to keep trying to do stealth like you would expect from an Assassin's Creed game. And I remember back in 2017, the first time I saw this game, it looked cool because I was like, okay, Egypt looks majestic. I kind of like seeing like the big, and kind of like the big money shots of doing the synchronization, that the thing that is in all these games from the top of a pyramid and sliding down. That seemed really cool. This is one of those games that we've talked about in a regular show, that this is one that has aged best when we did a second run through it. When I first played Origins, that didn't really click with me because I was still, my mindset was still in the old ones, and I was bringing that old mindset into this new one, and it made the game something that I enjoyed when I finally clicked with its mechanics. But by the time that happened, I had already beaten it, so I was like, yeah, this was fine, but it's not what I think or want out of an Assassin's Creed game at first. And then I went through it again this year when they did that 60 FPS patch for modern consoles, and I fell head over heels with Origins in a way that I had not felt head over heels with one of these games since almost a decade before, and the sequel that came after that we're going to talk about later. That there's just something about the way they did this formula that, I said it before, this is like crack cocaine. It just hits that lizard brain in my brain, where you just kind of keep unlocking the question marks, see the next little side quest, get a little bit cool new wrinkle to your character, Bayek of Siwa, as you're like the first Magi, one of the last Magi's of Egypt that eventually forms the Hidden Ones, that is the birth of the Assassin Order as we know it. That's why this game is called Assassin's Creed Origins, because it finally takes us all the way back to the very, very beginning, before the first game. So Masyaf and all that wasn't the beginning, there was more before that. And seeing the birth of that order and how things that have become tradition or imagery for the Assassin's Creed series came to be was kind of cool, even though some of them were like, really? Like, for example, I remember our friend Zach, he couldn't believe that the reason that the assassins would eliminate their ring finger for like their blade was because of a mistake by Bayek. The assassination that he cuts his finger. And then the triangle that becomes the symbol was because there was like a clam that fell that Aya lifts.
The skull of a bird.
Yeah, it was a bird. Yeah, I thought it was a clam, but that's cool. And then she like lifts it, and then the symbol's there, and that's how they picked the symbol. They were cool. They were, if not a little corny, but I am a sucker for Origins personally, so I always enjoyed that. But gameplay wise, it wasn't until I finally came back now understanding what these games were that I could finally think of Origins a little higher. It's exponentially higher than I originally thought, because I sunk so many hours for like over a full month when we had nothing to play this year. And this is a game that I feel it's sort of like it has the Unity element of it's being appreciated even more with people going back. And this one does have the thing for me that Origins was Ubisoft experimenting into this more bigger RPG, bigger worlds, more to do and all that. I feel this had enough that it didn't bloat itself too much, and it felt more manageable. But tell me about it. Yeah.
So, I remember I bounced so hard off of Origins back when it came out because I wasn't as big on the Egyptian side of things, and like I both didn't know as much, wasn't as interested in their history. I have something in my eye, but it just grated against me because the whole like you had to lock on and you just had to like do this weird locked in back and forth that I just wasn't vibing with. The fact that you couldn't get instant hidden blade kills, just it was not going with me, so I dropped it like a bad habit. Then at your suggestion, after you enjoyed it so much, I repicked it back up, and then
this year
I'm really glad, and I'm really glad that I had already burned through most of the main storyline, but everything after that point I enjoyed so much more because I both got the really cool crossover sword and shield from Final Fantasy 15, which was just really funny that they were doing that back then. And then I just kind of worked through it. I was enjoying the plot. I was enjoying the characters way more. It was really interesting.
Some cool emotional core to both Bayek and his wife Aya, which big fans of Assassin's Creed 2 know Aya because of the statues from the 6 symbols that you have to find to unlock Altair's armor.
Characters.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize, I think, until you told me, actually. I just knew from, like, there was just so many years that passed since 2 that I forgot that was one of them. But then as soon as you mentioned it, I remembered that one of them was a girl from like the Egyptian area or like a Middle Eastern look to her, and I was like, oh frick, that was her. Which that was just really cool, and especially the ending to it, the really touching moments between the two of them talking about how they were going to make this process and how awesome Aya was for kind of coming up with the idea for it. The DLC kind of showing the logical conclusion of where that was, giving me memories of when I was playing Brotherhood, and how it felt to kind of be a mentor, older character stepping back into that role, and just how fun it was. And then also just not having as much of an issue with the hidden blade thing as I used to think. And
because I finally explained to you like what you needed to do to like have that keep up, even though it's extra busy work that doesn't vibe with how you would expect an Assassin's Creed game to work, that you have to like level up your hidden blade for that to happen. It's still something that I have to give them more props to Ubisoft, that they found a way to more RPGize this series, that when you understand what you're trying to go for and remove your preconceptions away, there's a really great game there.
That was what I needed to do, is like Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla are just a different game, and you cannot approach it at all from looking at everything else and trying to follow any stretch of logic.
Even though one of those did give you options to try to make it like old games. So but we'll talk about that much later. Yeah.
Right. So as far as where you put it, Alejandro, you got it pretty high.
Yeah, I actually put it just behind Syndicate as my number 4. And had I not replayed this year, this would have gone probably around 8.
And for me, it would have been at like 10 or something because I had bounced so hard on it.
And you have it at 8. Yeah.
And now I put it at 8.
Yeah, where you have put it.
Of virtue of so many others of me really vibing with, especially the new style, as we'll see in a minute. But Origins was the start of that, and I respect it so much more after the fact. So yeah, but moving on from there, the next year,
literally the next year,
Assassin's Creed Odyssey, giving us the best demigod Greek hero story and character and game that I think we've ever seen, because the only other Greek character that has a game series that big was probably God of War.
Yeah, with Kratos, exactly.
Yeah. And this just so unique of a style, because I remember like, okay, Origins, I didn't really like the style and the aesthetic of, but Odyssey, I know a lot about the Greek.
That's what helped me.
I knew a lot about that, and it was just like, I remember like literally reading the Iliad and the Odyssey for freshman year of high school, so I knew all of like the Mycenaean series of areas,
to me,
the islands.
To me, much earlier, I'm a huge fan of Hercules. The movie, the Disney movie, that was like my beginning of like understanding the Greek side of things, and I also had that thing that I also originally with Origins, Egyptian mythology was a very like very part of my purview, so that can help hinder your enjoyment of like identifying things. Oh, I knew of Cleopatra, I knew of Julius Caesar. Those were my cornerstones for that game. But knowing more of the mythology for Odyssey and what they were trying to pull, uh, helped me more like vibe immediately, and also understanding that this was now the formula for Assassin's Creed going forward, and seeing that they were building on top of what they had done with Origins.
Yeah.
This helped me like immediately latch on into Odyssey way more. I always keep telling that story. Is like Odyssey is a game that I wasn't even sure I was gonna get because I had enjoyed but not really loved Origins back in 2017. So I was like, yeah, I enjoyed it fine, but I don't know if I'm really loving this to keep with the series immediately, maybe until a point of sale. But then I had a month between this and Red Dead 2, and I was like, what am I gonna play? I already finished Spider-Man. I already finished Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Oh, it's there. I mean, I like the series. Maybe this is gonna pass the time. And I fell head over heels with how addictive the gameplay loop was with Odyssey, especially by giving you a character that was, for all intents and purposes, like you mentioned, it was a demigod. This was the Wonder Woman game we've never gotten, to the point where I know there's a Wonder Woman game that's coming from WB Games
right.
and Monolith.
They're
The guys that did the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games, they're doing a Wonder Woman game and doing the Nemesis system with this Wonder Woman game. That's the next evolution for that. And I
that's good.
I hope so too. But my thing is that I feel Assassin's Creed Odyssey already did the Wonder Woman game. I don't even know if they'll be able to reach the heights of the gameplay highs they give you here with the Spear of Leonidas, that it's a precursor thing that can make you leap from super tall
power. Like,
super
props to
tall
them for managing
building
to write it into the lore of, like, we already know pieces of Eden literally can alter a person who holds them and give them these supernatural abilities, even though it's set in reality so that nobody else would really have it. It would make sense that there is a character in history written about in our reality that has all these crazy things considered myths, but it's a piece of Eden giving them these supernatural powers. So it's like, it's kind of cool that they fed back into that while somehow not breaking the lore of Assassin's Creed.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Yeah, okay, to a certain extent. There's a lot of stuff that they really break, but at least that one I felt like was believable enough in their series that I could just kind of roll with. As far as just like you said, Cassandra is clearly best girl, best choice, and Alexios,
better than Alexios. Alexios is such a
great
meathead.
choice for the villain.
Yeah.
As you know, it really heavily focuses on the line of Leonidas, so the family of you being the son or daughter of Leonidas himself, or was it further than that? It was like a grandfather.
It's like a grandfather thing that then is the father, and then you don't know if Cassandra was adopted or not, or he's still from bloodline. It was like this weird family lineage thing.
But that was like a huge plot line for that, which somehow tied also into the crazy cult system that they had going on.
The cult of Cosmos.
Yeah. And how crazy that kind of takes you everywhere. As far as that goes, into a couple negatives, the plot really kind of goes all over the place, literally and figuratively, because I lost my thread so many times because they overpacked this entire map with so much stuff to go, which is a good thing for a lot of people that really want it. And it certainly is. And it's like, if you want to play Odyssey till Jesus himself comes back, you can.
Literally. It's a literal Odyssey of a video game, because I can think of another open world in the Assassin's Creed series that is as densely packed with content like this one, to its benefit and its detriment. This is a game that, if you're vibing with the loop, you're not gonna have a problem like rinse and repeating a lot of the same stuff, because the gameplay loop is so fun, and doing a bunch of stuff with Greece and its different islands, because this game reintroduces the boat mechanic of Black Flag to get into the boat and to reaching a new island with no loading this time.
It was good enough.
It harkened back to that, but it's also a game that you grind a lot also, and you have to be a big fan of grinding up your level to be able to do story missions. And that there's a reason they also sold an XP boost in the microtransaction and people tested it. It's like, if you had the XP boost on, and you saw your XP gains, they were the same amount of XP gains you gained in Origins that didn't have an XP boost. So that game, so they kneecap the thing into it's like intentionally kneecap so that you would have to do literally everything to advance. So it was a way. It was a cheat. It was sleazy. It was.
Yeah.
No, don't worry. If you do all the content we're giving you, you'll be able to like experience the story. But if you're just wanting to experience the story and don't want to do much grinding, there's the XP boost. So I always have to think about that because it's like just the existence of that from the very beginning is lazy. And they actually added the XP boost to Valhalla after the game, but I didn't buy that thing.
And I don't think you really needed it for Valhalla.
You didn't exactly.
We'll
definitely talk about that. So it has those like Odyssey has those little annoyances that now that I'm removed from the addiction, because I tell you this game is like. I don't know if I already did the crack cocaine. I don't know if I had the crack cocaine analogy, but there's just something. Odyssey is a very, very addictive game. Story-wise, lore-wise, the only thing that to me this makes it a worthy Assassin's Creed story is that it at least gives you context for the Templars or where they started with the Cult of Cosmos and how that dovetailed into them being worshippers of the first civilization, which gets their due with the DLC Fate of Atlantis that you still haven't played.
But I have it at least.
Yeah, you have it now.
I'm gonna get to it eventually.
And this was a game that got better with the DLC. They fixed some stuff. They added stuff. This was basically a live service game.
Yeah.
And it's one that whenever I start playing, it's like I just can't get ripped away from it. There's something really good about it, but I feel its flaws puts it behind many of the things that I have above it. But this is putting it. I put it there, but I still think of it really strongly. To me, this is number 7 on my list.
And for me, it was the number 5, like
number 5,
just a little above the middle of the road. I really came around to it, especially after revisiting it.
This was this year also because you were still in the Origins hunger. I was like, just jump into Odyssey if you're feeling like that, and you haven't beaten it completely because there's 3 endings.
And I've gotten at least 1, if not 2.
You got 1. You got 1.
Not the actual big ending of the Cosmos, all that stuff.
So when you beat basically the story that makes it a standalone game with the family, the Pythagoras story, which is what connects it more to the first civilization, because you find mythological creatures that end up being the illusions from the Apple of Eden, and that's what connects also to the Fate of Atlantis DLC. So that's dovetails right in if you want to go that way, and the Cult of Cosmos that connects to the Assassin's Creed series. If you finish the Cult of Cosmos, it's going to give you like a cutscene that connects you with the rest of the Assassin's Creed series. That's the only time that you connect, but through the majority of that game you're not connecting to it. So that's why I put it slightly lower than the other ones that I prefer a little bit more, that are a little bit more intrinsically tied to the lore, which is what has kept me playing. But I would say Odyssey is a good game, but kind of like Black Flag, which I have it slightly above it. They're really good in spite of not really being Assassin's Creed games to what I like.
They're both really good at pirate game and
mythological.
Mythological character game.
Yeah.
As opposed to actual Assassin's Creed. But yeah, our next one though,
the latest one,
kind of goes back into a bit of a return to form, as we've slowly started to find out in some ways. So now we're ending this now with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the one that came out in November 10th, 2020. Obviously, this one will forever be tied to the pandemic, because this was and also the launch of the latest consoles. So Valhalla was in the same situation as Black Flag, and this was one that I sort of started playing back in 2020, but I actually held myself from playing it because I really wanted to play it as in a newer machine, just knowing that it was gonna be it was gonna run everything much better, especially knowing that you played it in those machines and knowing that you're like, this looks so beautiful and looks so smooth. And I was playing on PS4 where it was all grindy and it was taking forever to load. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna wait until I get my shot with it. And it finally got your shot 2 years later, because I got my PS5 a year after, 6 months after, and then I had a big backlog of new games were coming. I was like, I had heard it was pretty long, so I was like, I'll wait for it, and it just kept cascading. And this was the year where I was like, you know what? I got a whiff of what the ending was supposed to be. I was like, you know what? That sounds so insane, so ridiculous, and I need to see it for myself. And that's when I got in. And I tell you, Valhalla,
I played the bulk of Valhalla this year for like 113 to 120 hours of this damn game. And Valhalla for me was finally them in this 3 arc game taking their learnings in the RPG-ness and try to find a way to bring back everything that could make cool the older style of Assassin's Creed to try to make a best of both worlds scenario. And I felt they did a fairly decent job at serving both masters. Giving you the option for the one-hit assassinations again, even though stealth can be pretty broken at times in spots. In the raid areas that I tell you that, no, yeah, you're in raid area, you're immediately gonna, they already programmed those for you to be seen, and I have video evidence of otherwise in other places where I fully did stealth and it was satisfying. Be like, yes, a one-hit kill is how it should be, a one-hit kill. But I would say Valhalla is the most magical Assassin's Creed setting that I played in years, aided a lot by its out of this world soundtrack that I already put in before we came back from the break. There's just something about the soundtrack of this game that's just so soothing, so magical, so otherworldly, on top of the otherworldliness that you deal with the mixing the Viking mythology with Asgardian mythology, which is so funny. In the eve of God of War Ragnarok, which we're currently playing, I beat it yesterday. You're currently beating. It was so funny getting to experience that in the eve of also getting to experience that other Norse mythology game, and finding their way of making that mythology make sense with the Assassin's Creed mythology in a way that makes sense for both. And it was a non-stop gover of junk food for me, like Odyssey was back then, even in an even more intense way, because this was giving me finally a game that felt like what I loved of the series back then, on top of giving me the gameplay loop that I felt so head over heels with an Odyssey, and making me really curious to see now where the rest of the series goes. This is one you still haven't fully finished, but you played so many hours of it that when you reach the ending, I don't think it's gonna change your opinion of what you think of Valhalla. But tell me about it.
That was one of those ones that back in 2020, that was one of the first games, second game that I played on my PS5. The first being Watch Dogs Legion, and then this as soon as I got back, of course, from my wedding. So this also ties heavily with me getting married, because it came out 2 days after my wedding, and then I played it right when I got back. And I enjoyed it. It was pretty, it was kind of fun, and then I thought that it was a little soulless after a while, because I just wasn't getting into the real meat of it. And then after you went back and was really enjoying it once again, because by the time did I predate going back to it before you did? Because you were still playing Odyssey and stuff, and I was playing.
So how it was and you played it in 2020. It started around the same time that I did. I heard that how much I saw the Digital Foundry videos. I heard your experience of it on PS5. I was like, yeah, I'll just wait.
Right, then after that,
I don't know if you retouched it on 2021, but I know you started playing it again this year in 2022.
Right. When did you go back to Valhalla? Was that last year or this year?
This year in 2022. Okay. You started because you did that 3-week period where you went back to Origins, went to finish Odyssey, and then you were still in the mood, and then you just went to take a
straight
into Valhalla.
I think I predated your revisit for Valhalla. Okay, yeah. So then I was like, oh shoot, this is actually kind of vibing with me now that I've like reframed my entire mindset about the series. And then I started telling you how it was good, and then finally you bit the bullet, and then you just started catching up to my total hours played very quickly, because I think I was at like 60 or 70 hours when you started, and then you finally overtook me at like 100 hours.
So overtook you.
And now you just blew straight past me and kept going. But it, like, I enjoyed it so much more because I saw it as a different kind of game, where we've kind of traded the historical accuracy side of it, where it's like, hey, look at all these really cool real life people, and then it turned into, hey, this takes place in history, but it's actually this crazy sci-fi narrative going on. And as long as I think you keep it in mind for that,
that's always been me, and that's always been me since I way back there. I knew that's what this series was, and then it strayed into trying to downplay its sci-fi-ness for a little bit, and then Odyssey brought it back full on, almost a little too outlandish. And Valhalla, from the very beginning, it was like, no, we're like mixing all of that together in a way that for this series is nonsense. It makes sense. And to me, I think what elevates this so much is just the stupid soundtrack. That Raventhorpe song, the one with like the violoncellos and hearing while you're at your base, I would literally just stop there, just waiting for that music to kick in, just walk around my establishment that reminds me of when I was building the villa and other stuff in the older Assassin's Creed games, and just seeing like that beautifully realized old school England. And again, that at a time where I was playing medieval, I was watching medieval-ish stuff, like my rewatch of Game of Thrones and seeing House of the Dragon, and reminding myself that that's what George R. Martin was sort of basing that franchise on in that time of England. That is what I was playing, and learning how that is so intricately dovetailed into Viking Norse myth from back then between Norway and England in that era where that country was being populated. It just didn't stop engrossing me. I know a lot of people. This game also has. It maybe not has the bloat of Odyssey because it's easier to mainline it. Yeah. Like you get so much XP here. It's like it doesn't feel like you always have to be grinding. That's something that I learned pretty early. I was like, so I was wasting my time trying to grind up so much because I like to stay ahead of the grind myself if I know there's gonna be grind. But Valhalla, no, it's like no, just follow the main stories. You're barely gonna be doing any grinding. It's just there's a lot. It's just a lot of it.
It takes forever.
Yeah, it's a lot.
You're gonna be there for a while.
Yeah.
So it's another one of those situations where it's like if that's the game that you buy and you don't want to buy other games or you don't feel like it, these games are going to hold you for a long time.
I've never been there. We've always had this conversation in previous episodes of the podcast that I don't base my game's enjoyment on how many hours I can extract out of it, because to me that's arbitrary if a game is bad. What if and
there's certainly a threshold that would be reached
exactly
where it's like, all right, that's just excessive. But at least it depends on, I think, what you're going for out of your hobby and what you're doing in your life at the time and stuff like that. So it just kind of it's arbitrary to the person.
Arbitrary eye of the beholder stuff. But yeah, Valhalla is definitely something that is almost endless. Obviously, I also did the thing. I also have very bad habit with how I play open world games where I like clearing everything, so that bloats my
all of it.
Yeah, I also did that I tried doing that with Ragnarok, and that pushed me to 43 hours when I beat it. Yep. So yeah, with Valhalla, it's like I know this one goes either way for many people. Some people rank this very high. I have it relatively high. You also have it pretty high. The length of it and maybe not vibing with the myth or the kind of England it is also has it pretty low for other people. From what I've seen, it's like it's one of the divisive Assassin's Creed games. What's the overall consensus? But to me personally, this is one of my favorites. Like Valhalla really cracked that to the point where I left all the DLC untouched. I did 120 hours without DLC. So no Wrath of the Druids, no Siege of Paris, no Dawn of Ragnarok. Once I'm done with all we're playing, I'm going back to that. Because I tell you, it's just a game that it is my comfort food. In a year where my comfort food that used to be Destiny is no longer my comfort food, that became a homey place for me, like with the music, the vibe, the calmness. Man, I love Valhalla so much. It's my number 5, Paul.
And it's number 4 for me. So it seems like there was a bit of a consensus there. I'm shocked at how high it ended up being for me, especially because I've really put it through its paces and kind of talked smack about it on record and off record because of a lot of various reasons, some of which valid, some of which were just me being a little bit obtuse or not having the right mindset when I was trying to play it. But overall, it was a nice way, just like you said, you sit down and you listen to that music while you look out at that environment, and there's few games that you can get that feel from, one of which was Red Dead 2 for me. One of them is now this. And it's I'm just pleasantly surprised at how much I ended up enjoying it. So yeah, that's it for us for these rankings. Now we gotta kind of summarize all this, but
just to read them quick. So here are my rankings from 12 to 1. Number 12, AC Rogue. Number 11, AC Unity. Number 10, AC3. Number 9, AC Revelations. Number 8, AC1. Number 7, AC Odyssey. Number 6, AC Black Flag. Number 5, AC Valhalla. Number 4, AC Origins. Number 3, AC Syndicate. Number 2, AC Brotherhood. And number 1, AC2.
And for me, quickly running through them, 12 was Rogue, 11 was 3, 10 was Syndicate, 9 was Revelations, 8 was Origins, 7 was 1, 6 was Unity, 5 is Odyssey, 4 is Valhalla, 3 is 2, 2 is Brotherhood, and 1 was Black Flag.
So something fun that we wanted to do here with Paul was that because we both had our separate lists, we wanted to then see how we could try to combine them with giving games different points based on where we rank them, and adding them up and see what could be like our ultimate list, like combined. So kind of how it works is that whatever game we would put as our number 12, which was last, would only get 1 point. And then as you keep climbing the list, it would be like 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points. To the point where whatever game would be our number 1 would receive 12 points. We would add the points based on where I put it in my list and where Paul would put it on his list. Then we would add the points, and whoever had the most the higher the points, the combined list would go higher. So based on our two lists, this is what the X Buttons ranking of the Assassin's Creed series ended up being based on what I just read. So in our combined list, number 12 is AC Rogue, deservedly so. And number 11, Assassin's Creed 3. Ironically, those were the two bottom for Paul. AC3 was a little higher for me, but I would say that was well deserved. Number 10 was AC Revelations. Number 9 was AC Unity, which distresses me, but that's how the math worked. Number 8 was Assassin's Creed 1. Number 7 was Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Now, we hit with our first rub. AC Odyssey and AC Origins had the exact same amount of points. That would have been either number 6 or number 5. Then number 4 was AC Valhalla. Number 3 was Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And just like with Odyssey and Origins, Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood both had a combined points. So now me and Paul have to decide which one goes in 1 and 2 and which one goes in 5 and 6. Let's start with 5 and 6 with Odyssey and Origins. I say, Paul, Odyssey probably is better at a number 6 and Origins is number 5. What say you?
I was going to say the opposite.
The opposite?
Because once again, it really depends on what you're kind of going for based on setting, gameplay, and plot. Mm-hmm. So as far as like plot, I gotta give it to Origins. Mm-hmm. Gameplay, I feel like Odyssey kind of ekes it out for me.
Yeah.
And setting, Greece is more interesting to me than Egypt.
Ooh.
So that's kind of where I kind of see.
Yeah, we're a stalemate because I'm like, because the Origins setting I find more magical because Odyssey is a little bit more repetitive in a way. There's like less variety in the things that you visit there. It's the islands and the kind of same mythical architecture based on like the Greek gods that's there. That I feel like Origins just has a little bit more of a magical feeling to it. And of course, like I feel Origins is more of an Assassin's Creed game than Odyssey is. And that's kind of where we reach a little bit of a stalemate.
I think
the thing that I would even put Origins above Odyssey is that Origins is a little bit more digestible, whereas Odyssey is a non-stop gobstopper of content.
You give plenty of points on that situation, and in the end, there is the fact that it's an Assassin's Creed series, and Odyssey doesn't play nearly as much of a role in that plot than Origins does, giving a very, very much, maybe not needed, but very interesting idea to the literal origin of the Assassin's Creed order, basically. Yeah. So I'm willing to give Origins the eke out purely because of that and how it plays out. And Odyssey is more fun, but Origins is probably a more complete and efficient package.
So I would say then our number 6 combined would be Odyssey, and then 5 would be Origins. Now I'm willing to make a concession the other way in the other side.
Which is what I was hoping for.
Yeah. I'm willing to put Assassin's Creed 2 as number 2. Even though it's my favorite, I feel that when I see the Assassin's Creed and in a more holistic way, Brotherhood is the peak of the gameplay of Assassin's Creed, and even though maybe the story of Ezio is not doesn't advance much overall, other than seeing him, like I mentioned, to his peak, I feel just Brotherhood is a game that I feel like it's finally where Ubisoft realized this series, in a way, and
I think they've been trying to chase the high of Brotherhood ever since that came out, and the game itself being so strong with the solid, just exponential growth and of complexity, but also efficiency and realization of the like greater than the sum of its parts, almost, with all the gameplay from Brotherhood, just kind of brings it out over. Even though maybe 2 had the better plot and importance to the overall story, Brotherhood gives you such an important like vertical slice of Ezio as a character that it carries you between that and Revelations, to me at least.
Yeah, and I just think about it, it's like, and also let's I'm gonna try to bring ageism into this. I feel Brotherhood has just aged a little better. So
I will also give it that.
So that's
has not aged nearly as well.
Yeah, I love 2. I love 2, and I accepted it even with its like 2009 quirks. But 2010 Brotherhood, I tell you, it's like it's just a more complete package. And I will always say that Ubisoft proved a lot of naysayers wrong by, remember, red flags all around coming into Brotherhood. And it's surprised. So I think it's worth calling it the best Assassin's Creed game. And 2 being in a second spot, again, I can mention, tell me whatever day it is, it's always between those 2. So I'm willing to let that concession go, because Brotherhood is so damn good. And also, just as kind of a more holistic thing, Brotherhood was the game, the last game the original director of Assassin's Creed directed, Patrice Désilets, because then he left Ubisoft. So yeah, and especially that wasn't a game that he wanted to make, because his idea was 3 games, and then Ubisoft was like, let's put another one, and it's still like he did his work there and then left, and still pretty good. So overall, the best Assassin's Creed game is Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, as said by the X Bottom podcast, Paul. So
we've done it.
We've done it.
Definitive list, everybody. You can put your pens down. We figured it out. We've done math.
Yeah,
that's
thanks,
how
math.
you know we did it right. This is science.
Yes. So, well, that's it for this week's episode, Paul. And happy birthday, Assassin's Creed. Like, hopefully you have more years to come. Obviously, we have Assassin's Creed Mirage next year. That's gonna scale everything back. So I wonder where we would insert it here. At least now we know what our list is. Maybe then we can do math again.
So I guess we'll see what ends up happening with that, and good lord, whatever's going to happen to Assassin's Creed Infinity.
Yeah, with
praying for the best, fearing for the worst.
Yeah, with Red and Hex and the Chinese game on mobile. So I tell you, it's a special series. Even if you notice, a lot of lows in the series, but there's just something that the highs just makes you love it, no matter what. So
nothing's been able to really over-encompass exactly the weird niche that Assassin's Creed fits into.
I just hope there's any developer that's gonna give us a new defining series sometime. Like I tell you, it's like kind of what I mentioned at the beginning of all this. Seeing this in 2007, in that year where we got so many new franchises, I'm dying to get more of that. Like when I think of new franchises only in the Sony side, Ghost of Tsushima and Horizon are even sort of there, but even then, those two I don't feel the special connection to those like I do this. So maybe it's because I've gotten older, but
maybe so. We have so many other things that we loved from the past, but I'm sure there's other people that are like, man, I grew up on Ghost of Tsushima, that crap was awesome, but it's like, I guess it's just part of the generational process, and hopefully we continue to have really iconic series in the midst of this consolidation process.
Absolutely. So hoping for the best, because that's what makes gaming more fun. So Paul, where can people find you?
As always, y'all can find me at Dork of Art on Twitter, at Dork-of-Art on Tumblr, and sometimes on YouTube, also at Dork of Art. And where can they find you, Alejandro?
They can find me at A_Dorsegovia on Twitter. They can find me at Alejandro Segovia 93 on Instagram. And they can find me at my written content at thecriticalcorner.com, which is definitely having content coming with the approval of AdSense there. So I may have a God of War Ragnarok review written within the next day or two. So Paul, this was fun. Let's see whenever we do what the next evergreen will be, because I don't know when this one's gonna launch either the week of the anniversary or the week after. It depends on you finishing God of War Ragnarok. So,
And I'm gonna go right into that after this and see how much more damage I can do to it.
absolutely. So, Paul, have fun with that, and also have fun with your vacation that's coming up soon, just in case it records.
I'm excited.
So yeah, and give my regards to Elizabeth and everyone. Stay safe. Start saving your money. Black Friday's coming, and you're gonna be also stuffing with delicious turkey soon. And be healthy, and remember
Press X.
to play.
Good night, everybody.
Hasta luego.